All right, good evening, everybody. I needed a walk, and I got my walk. And to be honest, I didn't 100% feel sort of up for streaming, but I think I've told this story before. The worry is never um, the day I don't do the stream. The worry is how much easier it is the next time to avoid streaming, and all of a sudden you wake up and you haven't done any more. Now I realize there's usually a consequence for doing this. Starting this late tends to mean that I just don't have that much of an audience, which is fine, right? I'm never owed an audience or anything like that. But it does give me sort of lower expectations in terms of where everything's going. So, of course, if you're watching all of this on YouTube, you'd rather me stop babbling and get into the broadcast. So just bear with me a quick second because I have a hot drink which is ready to go, and then I'll do the usual disclaimer and we'll be ready to start. Um, I'm hoping everything can kind of calm down. There's another kind of a I guess a pressure in terms of my time that's not exactly weighing on me, but it's something that I need to kind of recognize as a thing that's keeping me from doing some projects that I want to. Um, my family would like me to come out for something at the end of the month. I should actually double check the timing on that, but around the end of the month. And I mean, I'll do it because it's, family, right? Um, but if I can get a handful of stuff done for it, um, like there are some time sensitive things I can take advantage of at the same time. But the drawback is I've got a bunch of projects that are um, in front of it, let's say. Basically things that I need to get done as soon as possible. And Mecha Paladin. No, I mean, like, the problem is that most of this stuff is so it's either stuff that I've done, like, doing privately for myself. So, like, some of them are video projects I've been wanting to do for a while. So, like, obviously that's something I can only do for myself. Another batch is stuff that either I've been hired to do or is an offshoot of stuff that I've been hired to do. So that'll usually involve, like, proprietary data or, just knowledge about some projects that, haven't been announced or so on and so forth. So again, that's something that sort of I'm responsible for myself. And then there's, like, the handful of things that I want to do. And I really feel like those would give me a nice kind of recharge. But it's really important to me to catch up on the things that are time sensitive first. So I'll get through it, but, like, for those of you maybe wondering why Friday in particular have been having these late starts, is that, like, also just the weather hasn't been great for it, but, like, I can usually rely over the course of a week to just be able to, like, go out and go for a walk, or, like, go to a library, or, even just sort of sit with a laptop in a cafe and, get some writing done, or, code something up that I think is kind of neat, or just, like, generally do something that isn't sort of this relentless march towards a bunch of stuff that I'm either behind on or I feel that I need to get done. And also, where I'm working, there's a bunch of sort of deadlines coming up, and I mean, I don't want to, like, everybody's got their complaints about work, but I've been working on this thing which, in one sense, I am quite well suited for, but what it feels like is that my colleagues have been able to enjoy this, like, multi-year holiday. It's actually very, very, very hard to see the tangible work that has been done over that period. And it feels like I'm coming in, and like originally I had sort of these expectations that there was some work done and that I could rely on some of this work. And every time I rely on some of this prior work, it's very obvious that like it's just sort of stuff that's been thrown in without anybody really checking. And so, you know, I like working in the world of ideas and doing quote unquote research and writing puffy papers full of opinions that have, you know, no basis in the actual, you know, reality of the thing that I'm working with. I didn't do any work on my stuff, actually, Vanguard Master. I went for a nice long walk, which I'm just addressing now. But yeah, like, so again, I don't want to make this too big of a complaint about work, but like the thing is that one thing I can say about working with data, which a primary amount is, I think there is this misconception, because like I'm going to assume a few of you have been to like university or you know, you've possibly taken, if not an economics course, at least some kind of course that involves working with data, like a statistics course, political science, sociology, and I mean, obviously there are statistics originally was used to solve a bunch of different physics problems in that. It's just I don't have as clear of a so this is the one drawback that I have here is that the one thing I will say for the harder sciences is that the world is considerably better behaved than people. So obviously there's still like data cleaning and things like that happen. But I'd maybe put it to you this way. Like if there was an engineering problem that you had to work with, I suspect that maybe what you would be worried about are sensor readings that are sort of anomalous or otherwise sort of unusual to work with. Whereas let's say you were working with unstructured text, right? You were trying to sort of make sense of, you know, a whole bunch of Twitter comments or something along those lines and do some sort of sentiment analysis or anything like that. That's a very, very messy problem. You know, in particular, like a good example of this would be slang, right? Like is slang an error, or is it, you know, do you want to try and do you want to try and clean that into a normal term? But I mean, even then, I would suspect, speaking as someone who hasn't done the work on some of the harder science side of the equation, my experience of pretty much any data project is that, at least for like a serious one, a good like 70% of the work is like getting the data in a shape that you can actually answer the question that you're interested in. And then like that remaining 30% is the sitting down and thinking about what model you want to use, or like your estimation approach, or like, sorry, the estimator that you're using, or, you know, trying to present the results in like a nice graph or something along those lines. Like that's kind of the fun bit. And I get the feeling that a lot of people seem to think that like data analysis is the majority of that, and that it's like the Oompa Loompas that go and sort of just magic some data out of nowhere. But like I said, at least my experience of it, which again is very much on the social science side of the ledger, most of the serious work does actually involve getting your hands dirty with some very weird looking and frankly unpleasant data, right? Like my happy place is usually like taking something that's a little bit cleaner, like almost something like you'd see out of a textbook, and like messing around with some different ideas and you know, generating hypotheses and testing them and all of that. But I sort of understand the work is getting the but yeah, anyway, so this project that I'm complaining about, like, it really feels like there's a lot of time that's been spent on this whole, on like the fun parts without doing any work on like the hard data parts. And so the drawback for me is not only am I working backwards, that I'm sort of almost undoing a lot of this really crummy, you know, work that was done before, but because the timeline is so compressed, it's like I'm having to do it sort of at a very fast pace, and then in the end, like what should be kind of the treat at the end of like, model building and playing around and making the thing really shine. Like that part's already been mined out. So again, I don't have a lot of time for people who kind of, and I've actually worked in an environment that was like this too. A lot of people running around, very opinionated, didn't really have, in my view, the quantitative skills to sort of back up those opinions. And one of the very common features I would see among them would be that they would always feel that they were too good to do the data work. But what did interest me was that there were a couple of very quiet people who would put their head down, do the work, and they were the ones who, I mean, as far as publications were concerned, they were in like serious journals too. So there does seem to be a correlation between like being willing to do the unpleasant parts of the job and and producing good work. Now, I do need to apologize. But anyways, like I said, so that's been weighing on me a lot over the last couple of weeks. But what I have noticed is that, like, just because there's all this extra stuff that I'm doing, and of course I'm trying to maintain the stream and all these other things, the other thing that I've noticed is that just the number of times that I get to do that, like, restful activity of, heading out, going for a walk, reading in a cafe, doing anything, that's been sort of minimized. So Friday, I've been trying to carve out a little bit of time to just, the last couple of Fridays, honestly, I just kind of go under the covers and get a bit of a nap, which is not a great way of handling things. But I did want to make sure I did want to make sure that I spent some time on myself today. I did spend longer walking than I wanted, but it was good to get out. Now, I do need to apologize. I did sort of rush as soon as I got home to get ready to go for the stream, and I actually should have gone to the bathroom before I went. So I'm actually going to start with a break. I'll get the disclaimer out of the way, and then that's funny, Vanguard Master. Yeah, I'm fully aware that I still owe you my comment, so I'm planning on having that sometime tomorrow. And like I said, if I don't have it by that, you absolutely have the right to like bug me on Discord, because you've got meetings coming up, and I know there's a finite window in which my feedback can be useful to you. So, but anyways, I do apologize. I do have my hot beverage, so I don't need to wait for the kettle to boil, but I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I'll make sure, I think I actually owe a couple of messages to people as well, so I'm maybe gonna tie those up as well. And so I should be back momentarily, but if it winds up being a bit longer, it's not because I fell in. I'm going to just get a couple of other things that might interrupt the stream, and then I'll hopefully not need a break for the rest of the stream. So again, sorry about that. I know it's been like 15 minutes, but we'll be ready for Cyberpunk after that. So see you all in a little bit. Okay, sorry about that. I feel like that was probably about 5 minutes or so. So I wanted to, I wanted to try and make that a little shorter, but I've at least dealt with my responsibilities. So I don't think I need to catch up with. I don't think I need to catch up with anyone. Or like, I don't think I need to do anything else until.
Howdy, howdy, Night City. Welcome back. My guest tonight is Lieutenant Sarah Kokoski, spokeswoman.
Sorry, I don't think there's anything else that I'm going to need to do unless for whatever reason I need to go to the bathroom again within the next 3 hours. Which, in fairness, I'm finishing a coffee and I do have a tea in front of me too, and then yeah, just going stir crazy. I mean, need another break. Now, the one disclaimer I wanted to get out of the way. I was given a copy of this on release. Obviously, this is a fairly big deal. I remember a few people who have jobs in gaming were the ones who said, "Wait, you got a key?" I'm like, what are you trying to suggest by that? But yes, obviously, a AAA game on release is a pretty significant thing of value, at least by my standards as a broadcaster. And the provider did want me to remind you that you could buy this game on GOG. So that was one of the things they wanted me to say as a result of getting the key and sharing it. So I have both disclosed the fact that I was given something of value, both to say that thing and to stream the game. And obviously it's been a while since this game came out, but I don't think, I honestly don't think it's bad to be upfront about that stuff. Having now properly warned you all about my, I don't know, my underhanded advertising deeds, let's enjoy the game. So one of the things I think I was trying to do was basically buy up as many vehicles as I could with the money that I earned from doing missions that I could like actually beat. But there are a couple things that I want to do here. So first of all, let's see if we can improve my... Okay, we'll add one of those. This has already got an improvement. I seem to be carrying a lot of weight. Oh, 43? No, that's actually not that bad. Okay, so what do we have in the journal? First of all, for purchasable vehicles, I think maybe we'll just go from least to most expensive. So our current goal will be to buy the Little Mule at 35,000. Which of course raises the question, what is... Ah, yes. Okay, no, there's a couple of other things. So let's follow up on Over the Edge. So this was the this was that anime that we saw. Oh. Also, what do we have here? Wheel of Fortune. Wheel of Fortune means that change is coming. One's destiny could turn out for the better or the worse, yet it also bears the promise of new possibilities. The wheel reminds us that nobody remains on the top forever, but also that not every situation is hopeless. I don't necessarily like talking about the acquisition of material things as a substitute for things like job satisfaction and all of that, but there was a sale on Drive-Thru RPG. Now, I haven't done a lot of tabletop gaming. I think I've said in the past that it's kind of discrimination against the lonely, but I have been intrigued by Traveler, And so I picked up a couple of Traveler source books. But what interested me the most, shortly after I got them, there was apparently an article, or maybe it was a Reddit post or something like that. But anyways, there was a recognition that I think Todd Howard had said that Traveler was an inspiration for Starfield. Which is funny because I also know Traveler was an inspiration for XCOM. And one thing that's kind of interesting, I don't know how many of you listen to this. I do recommend it if you haven't checked it out. But Soren Johnson from Mohawk Games, and actually Layla Johnson has been joining the podcast for the last, I think, 6 or 7 episodes that I've listened to. But in any case, it's called Designer Notes, and it is basically interviews with sort of figures in gaming. There's a rather notable one. Looks like sounds like you found Martinez, or Martinez found you. Whatever the case, someone left you a package. I can keep an eye on it, but that's it. I ain't a fucking delivery boy. But yeah, so there's an interview with Sid Meier, for instance, or Jake Solomon. I mean, there's some figures that I'd like to see interviews with, but I know. Okay. A jacket for true edge runner belonged once to David Martinez, and before that, his mother, Gloria. Well, don't I look badass in that? But yeah, anyways, really good series, and I can't even remember why I brought. Oh, that's right. One of the comments from God, who was it who worked on Deus Ex? Let me see if I can find it on my phone real quick. Harvey Smith. I think one of the comments he made was that the most common game that comes up in terms of inspirations on Designer Notes is not it's not necessarily a video game. What it is it's Dungeons and Dragons. And this also is true for Jordan Weissman, who credits Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing as giving him sort of a reason to overcome his dyslexia, which I thought was very interesting. It's not, that's not the sort of thing that I personally think about when I think of gaming, because, I don't really need to be instructed to read. I maybe need to be sort of pushed away from a video game to... That is absolutely nuts that my knife is my highest DPS weapon. Interesting. Yeah, I do need to... I maybe need to be nudged away from other more distracting forms of entertainment, but that's about it. But what I also find interesting is that when I take a look at the stuff that I'm personally interested in, Traveler comes up a lot. Now, Traveler was after Dungeons & Dragons, so it doesn't surprise me that it comes up less frequently. But if you think of XCOM, so I think Julian Gollop had mentioned that it was Sniper, ! And Traveler, which were two big inspirations for XCOM, if I recall correctly. I can't remember if Traveler was an inspiration for Starflight, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was. And then now there's the Todd Howard connection for Starfield. I have a feeling one of the reasons for that is that, if I understand it correctly, Traveler it wasn't a setting, it was a series of rules for basically playing science fiction role-playing games. And that also meant that it was up to you to decide what that meant, because science fiction can obviously imply everything from Mad Max to 2001: A Space Odyssey, and of course everything in between. But apparently there was some interest in the setting. I don't know if it was Mark Miller's campaign or or people just wanted more source material. And so there's apparently this very long-standing setting now. I think it's called the Third Imperium or so. I've noticed the mongoose. So the drawback I find, I started with Traveler 5, which is like it's the edition. It seems to be like the closest to the original people who first made Traveler. Like it seems like that is the closest. It's almost like when you're thinking of different Linux distributions, right? Like you can kind of see that big branch, right? And like eventually you wind up with like BSD, and like you've got a whole other thing, off to the side. Obviously BSD and Linux are different, and in fact Mac OS, I believe, is a descendant of BSD. But anyways, right, so like there's a whole bunch of different Travelers. There have actually been video game adaptations of them as well. But my complaint about Traveler 5 is that it'll be like explaining some rules or a setting, and then there'll be like a table that feels completely unrelated to any of the things that I'm looking at. And obviously as a first introduction to a rule system, that's not great. And so I did settle for the Mongoose one so I could maybe get a grip on it, and then I decided when I was ready to maybe pick apart something a little bit more intense in terms of its tables and rules, I'd take up Traveler 5 again. Traveler does have a setting, but minimally fleshed out because they wanted to leave plenty of space for people. Yeah, so the fairly famous Free Trader Beowulf line, like the thing that was originally on the cover, so far as I can tell, that's never actually resolved what happened to them. I think the idea is, man, that's a really nice view. If I recall correctly, the intention was that whoever was running it would basically, assuming they even wanted to pursue that, would decide what happened to it. Which is neat. I actually really like that approach to doing things. But again, it doesn't necessarily surprise me that a system like that wound up being so influential for game designers, because here you've got a toolbox for creating games and creating experiences.
You ever work for a corp?
You trying to offend me?
Let's just say I've met a few of your kind. Quick, talk a good game, always fighting for their people, for a small fee.
And?
Suits, most of them. Tell me about Santo Domingo.
A lot of people tried to get a foothold here. Corpos, gangs. None of them made it. But real people live here in Arroyo and Rancho Coronado. Can't pull the wool over their eyes. We are the blood and guts of this city.
Why El Capitan?
The people, they're grateful. They show me respect because I put them first.
Wow, a true altruist.
Corpo world's a disease. Power's gotta get back in the hands of the people. And we'll do it. You'll see.
How's biz?
I don't care for the word biz. I call it work. Hard work. Honest work. And I can't complain.
All right. Nice chatting with you. Let's find something to do. So this one is for Rogue. Oh, that's right. I think I was taking a look. So we've got a number of high threat ones, but we had been following up on some of the nomad jobs. So let's see how that goes. Yeah, so Mecha Paladin, it sounds like you are familiar with... Actually, I can ask this on two sides. So it sounds like you're pretty familiar with tabletop. So I'm curious what your background with that is. But now I also need to ask the resident game designer, Vanguard Master, whether or not you've done any tabletop gaming. Oddly enough, actually, I've heard that, what is it, cribbage? I've heard cribbage is a big Navy thing, but that might be an American Navy thing, so I could be, I could be barking up the wrong tree there, but I'm sure I will find out one way or the other. Do not drive into cacti on a on a motorbike. Do not recommend. Yeah, I don't know. The big threat for me, or not threat, but like the big problem for me is that I really like RPG source books because they're wonderful for building up the imagination. Actually, a good example of this was there was a White Wolf product I found out about. I think it was called Orpheus. And apparently it was intended to sort of be both a combination of a rule set as well as like a campaign. And I always found that to be a little funny. This stuff could turn hostile. It's gonna back off a little bit. Get off.
Well, V, there's this techie, Big Pete. He just made an appearance in the Badlands, only I'd rather he hadn't. Catch my meaning? I'm sending some info on this static scum your way.
Gun for hire. Get rid of Big Pete, a mechanic with wraiths. Big Pete runs a garage out here in the Badlands, fixes up clunkers for the RAF and Shiv. Before that, he was hustling as a techie in Night City. Now, Pete's not your definition of a nice guy. Soon enough, he made some powerful enemies and had to skip town. Just so happens, Pete's enemies are my friends, and I owe said friends a favor. You make Pete eat dust, I get one less favor to owe. It's not that hard to find him, just try any of the race garages. So I seem to recall the wraiths are bad dudes, and Mecha Paladin here says, I started in grade 5 when I found a binder of D&D rules in the school Lost and Found and kind of walked off with it. Same year, family friend who's 5 years older than me would play a game with you with Legos and a story, and I didn't realize at the time it was role-playing. Oh, cool. And hello to you, Takri. I'm not deliberately starting the broadcast late for you on Fridays, but I'm glad that it turns out. I'm glad that it's been turning out. I hope you're doing very well. And we've got Vanguard Master. I've tried playing D&D, but unfortunately the two groups that you found within your friend group that played both broke up. One of the players was dating the DM, and when they broke up, so did the group. And then after the second time, I figured it was a curse aimed at you. Yeah. I mean, it's... It's hard, right? Like, I'll be honest with you. It's weird that I am as interested in tabletop as I am, because the amount of playing of tabletop that I've done is very, very small. But it's personally something I'm interested in, and I guess it's because I've seen this wonderful potential for it, even though the groups that I've been in have not been very good. So dating the DM is the worst idea. Every group that you've been in that has someone dating the DM has a group that's been seriously stressed. Yeah. I don't know, and it's a shame, right? Like, it's kind of... It's like people who really freak out in like video games, right? It's not like you get to keep the gold at the end of the battle. Now, I mean, I have on occasion gotten a little stressed out And I tend to notice sometimes it's when people are like, you know, acting in a way that's dragging the whole experience down, and I could probably lighten up on that. So I'm not completely lost in terms of some of the dynamics behind it. But yeah, like, I mean, obviously the purpose of it is to have fun, right? It's to, you know, to be an enjoyable activity, same way that playing video games or, you know, lots of entertainment is. And so you would think that if you're a couple, you know, it's another fun thing that you can do. And yet, I very rarely hear of stories where, you know, the being a couple has been something that's really enhanced the experience. So, anyways. The first and new Nomad codes elaborate various reasons you might be expelled from your family, including share with others in your clan and do not keep for yourself that which may help another in your clan. Reading those documents today, it's hard to fight the feeling that they are written in different, happier times. These days, nomads are more often expelled from their families for murdering or raping a fellow family member, human trafficking, poisoning the water supply, or betrayal of the clan. And we have a word for those nomads, the Raffen Shiv. Once ousted, most Raffens still maintain their nomadic lifestyles. They form larger groups on the road, but nobody would call these groups family, not even in jest. Raffen Shiv prowl the Badlands, ambushing unsuspecting travelers, corpo convoys, or even, and with particular relish, other nomad camps. A gang of Raffen Shiv even formed outside of Night City's gates, the Wraiths. They're well-organized, effective, and willing to do anything. After all, like all Raffens, they've got nothing left to lose. I'm also going to take a second here to read about Dakota Smith, because I feel like I should be doing some more details on this. The Badlands resident fixer and member of the Northern California Pomo tribe. At first glance, Dakota seems like a harmless desert dweller. It wouldn't be wrong to say that sometime after the Unification War, she lost touch with reality. In her free time, she deciphers the secret language of smoke. But if you ignore that, she's an extremely perceptive fixer with a mind for biz few in this part of California wouldn't envy. Those who take her jobs always make sure they're done to a T, because firstly, Dakota's never gone behind anyone's back, and secondly, if they decided to go behind hers, they'd be vulture breakfast in no time. You'll also notice she doesn't go anywhere without her oxygen tank. She's been huffing pure oxygen for decades now. Okay. So. 7A-E9-1C, so... Table's feeling a little light with only 2 games this week. 3 if you count your solo. I think your solo game counts, but... I'll confess, I was only aware of 2. I'll confess, I do rather like hacking in this. One game, I got to play I'm pretty sure it was a Sega Genesis version. I obviously was not playing it on original hardware. So if I recall correctly, there was a Super Nintendo Shadowrun game, and there was a Sega Genesis Shadowrun game, and I'm pretty sure, like, again, if I recall correctly, the Genesis one actually had a pretty neat, like, cyberspace or matrix or whatever it's called. I'll be honest, I can't remember what they call it in Shadowrun right now. Actually kind of makes me want to try it again to see if it's as good as I remember. Because these things tend to be a little bit better in memory than in practice. But I do kind of like this one. I feel like there's some things that I could do a little bit better with the quick hacks. But I do sort of like this process of, you know, sort of like scoping out the so to a certain extent there are some sort of like formulas to, you know, to this overall experience, right? But like I kind of like the idea of, you know, I'm on a job, I'm sort of scoping out the location, I'm, you know, trying to trying to get a little bit of an edge in terms of how I'm approaching the you know, how I'm approaching the mission and such. And the fact that I'm able to sort of go in and manipulate you know, the security systems to be able to get that edge, I think is kind of neat. It's a little thing, right? But it's, I don't know, it counts for me. Okay, I'm hoping I can stick this guy in a trunk somewhere. Monday D&D, Tuesday solo D&D, and Wednesday's supposed to be Fallout, but that one's hella flaky schedule-wise. I'm sorry to hear that.
Game on!
So I could probably just leave these two alone. The real question is there a way that I'm going to be able to dispose of them? Yes. I can take care of that floodlight. Trying to think of the best way to handle. So the tricky part here is I got to find a way of causing the distraction with the floodlight, but not being in a position where they're gonna like mess with me. Well, actually, here's one I can do.
Oh, you've stepped in it now.
Okay. So I gotta be quick.
Weird.
But I was hoping to take him to the dumpster, but they started resisting, so. This guy's probably going to turn around any time now. I don't think it's likely that this person's going to be detected, but I don't think it hurts to be careful. Am I encumbered? That's a shame. So it's mostly the guy on the roof I'm worried about. I hear a camera. There it is. So again, the worry always is that one of these folks turns around right when I'm ready to strike. There we go. I don't have anywhere to put them. As you've noticed, Kree, I still have the lovely pink booties. Okay, I will take advantage of that, but I want to deal with the guy on the roof first. Okay, 1C55 BD. 1C. This one gives me the 55. I should have gone for this 55 though. Yeah. Okay, not as easy to get to this guy. Oh, hang on. Heaven's sake. Okay, so this is going to be a little tricky with where this guy's looking, but... Worst sentry ever. Okay, so obviously there's a bunch of people inside that I need to worry about, but I don't need to worry about any surprises. Wish all sentries stood around like that. Alright, so I can turn off the remaining cameras. Loan. You're bro, man, please, I really need the scratch. Jesus, Mikey, fuck's wrong with you? How many times have you come to me for Eddies? What the fuck does it all go? Maybe I'm your bro, but this time you ain't getting shit from me. Bro, come on, I really need it. See, if he added more E's and A's, he probably would have got it. I've been down on my luck lately, but I know how to bounce back. I just need an itty-bitty loan for an investment. Last time, I swear. Everybody's favorite company. I'm sure J.K. Rowling must be very happy that, at least temporarily, the controversial wizardry company was the D&D one. Sorry, that's probably not something I should be laughing about, but Big Pete to Manny Quaid. I've got the most Nova next-gen shit you'll ever lay eyes on, or more like won't. You'll know what I mean. Sorry, you'll know what I mean. You take it off my hands to move. I need to, an answer quick, because they're already snapping at my heels. You in? Water, Chrome, and Blood, the Fourth Corporate War. Actually, we read this one, so... see if I can get any upgrades. Nope. Probably shouldn't just be rating this by DPS. I may also want to consider like, if there's a very high damage sniper rifle, that's probably because it's a single damage. And I could use more of that, to be honest. Okay, that's a guy I did not notice. Now, I've got an important question here. Do I have the ability to, like, drop down on these? I can't remember what the... Yes. I am going to save, though, just in case. You're kidding me! Whatever happened to my aerial... Maybe I have to be looking at them? No, that's just cheating.
Don't like this.
At this point, I'm trying to see if I can actually, like, pounce on these guys or not. So one thing you may not quite notice, I notice because I die and reload a lot, but... Okay, so... Cool. But the action in the level actually starts going a little bit before it's done loading. This really sucks if a fight's about to break out. But yeah, so like basically, I think probably, you know, when the bar is about 80% done is roughly where it happens. So that's why the guy was sort of standing in front of the area when I saved, but by the time that I loaded, they were already walking away, and it apparently was just because they don't go in that room. Basically, I saved roughly before that character was about to move, and obviously I only found out by reloading. I think we've got time for... Well, wait, we'll finish the mission, then we'll play the arcade game. Okay. E97ABD. I don't think... Yeah, it's not gonna work. On a completely unrelated note to Cyberpunk,
Whoa!
Oops.
And the rest of the crew?
Wouldn't count on it.
So I'm supposed to take the fall for a piece of shit jammer that don't even work?
Sometimes it shines and sometimes it rains.
Sound like my brother. Wait, you're the one who saved Tiny Mike.
Don't change the subject.
Mikey said you're a solid merc. Change your mind and I'll pay you. Kiss and see goodbye right after.
so I'm not a fan of the fact that... Not really a fan of the fact that the crouch button, like, it forces you to crouch and you basically wind up skipping over dialogue. If you don't.
Might have read a convo between you and your brother. I know you're flat broke.
That's old news. I'm flush now. Let me go and I'll prove it.
No can do. Sorry.
Want to go?
That cost me $2. Congratulations, you're now the proud owner of a Thornton. We are proud to offer our Thornton guarantee for reliability and convenience at an affordable price. Before you embark on a new adventure behind the wheel of your new Thornton, please take the time to read this owner's manual. We can do 55 1C E97A BD. I think this is gonna take me out of the area. Yeah, I did want to play the arcade game. All right, let's see if I can do better. So here's a question for you. When we hosted Katako last time, I noticed that in The Witcher, she's in a fantasy market for like art, and in that market, in that market, one of the one of the paintings was of like a griffin or something. And I propose that art markets in fantasy settings should have like science fiction pictures, because they already live in a world of like griffins and other fantastic beasts. By the way, the hind legs on the back, that's a bug from where the game when Witcher 3 first came out, right? The thing to remember here is I've never actually played Witcher 3. I actually didn't care. Oh, why did I even think I could do that? I want to do this again. I know, but the thing is that it's always big fantasy paintings that I see in games, and the fact of the matter is that there's yes, art does represent everyday occurrences, but it's overrepresented in fantasy settings. I guess the implication here is that fantasy artists are less imaginative because they're only focused on representing common occurrences. One of the reasons why I point that out actually is for those of you who are fans of Watchmen. One of the really common things that I get about Watchmen, so I have had a few people who've read it kind of need me to really nag them to keep I've kind of needed to nag them to keep reading because they get bored, and one of the really common points that people get bored with is they totally don't get the pirate story in it. And I believe, this might even be something that was said in an interview, but at least my guess here of the pirate thing is that it's in a world where there are superheroes. What do you make comic books about? And in that case, it's a comic book about pirate stories. Yeah, I kind of savaged myself there. Yeah, I'm in the same boat, Kree. So people have told me that the first one is very forgettable, and there's really no reward to finishing it or carrying your character over. So I think I've just kind of accepted that I'm not going to play the first... Like, I just don't really like playing the first game. So I think I'm probably just going to acknowledge that I'm never going to finish the first game. I might give the second one a try. But honestly, the one that I'm hearing a lot of people... Well, actually, it's worth mentioning here, like, my skepticism with regards to Cyberpunk was actually largely based on the fact that people's estimation of CD Projekt Red was basically the delivery of one admittedly very good game, but that their track record wasn't really there. Like, if you wanted to bet on a company based on a track record, you'd think of something like a BioWare or some of the Ubisoft divisions, like Ubisoft Montreal or something like that, who also have had fairly high profile. I don't know if I should call them failures, but like certainly some of the shine has worn off. I mean, there is a certain point at which I need to stop talking about the launch of Cyberpunk 2077, but I felt in this very odd position where I feel like I was right on the skepticism, but that essentially people overcorrected on this game. Because ultimately, I think Cyberpunk, like, overall, if I'm completely fair about it, I think this is a perfectly good game. Like, is it the sort of one that, relative to its marketing, like, is it one of these things that sort of redefined what's possible for gaming for me? Probably not, right? I'm probably gonna have to go through to the end of this. Like, I did actually really like the assault on Arasaka Tower. I do hope that there are more bits where I get to play Johnny Silverhand, because like one of the things I really liked about that mission was, I mean, obviously what they did was just gave me a very powerful character, but I sort of felt, I don't know why I thought I could do that. I felt I sort of felt like I felt the gravity of the character, which I think is more than just setting. I think that's more than just. How do I put it? Like, it's more than just boosting my stats. Like, there was something about that sequence that I was very, very attached to. But yeah, I don't know. Like, in the case of I do want to try Witcher 3. I'm told that it's very good, and it's at the very least one I should become familiar with. But what I do tend to know, I'm a little bit like to Korea in that I do like playing things in order. And one of the reasons I like playing things in order, and like somebody was talking about the Red Dead series, and they're like, well, technically Red Dead Redemption 2 is a prequel, so I was like, yes, I know, right? It's like, I'm sorry. I'm also sorry to use that voice with that, because I don't think the person was necessarily being like a know-it-all about it, but like that information's not exactly secret, right? The reason why I say I like playing stuff in the order that it was released is that I tend to find that if I play a game out of sequence, I will be more like I'll feel the absence of the improvements that they made in later games. So, for instance, it took me a very long time to get into the Total War series. And it definitely seems like one of those series I should be into, right? But it's actually one that I struggled for a very long time to get into. And I like Total War Troy quite a bit. I like, the Warhammer ones are fine. I mean, I think the Warhammer ones, there's like just this endless demand for the series. What's another one that I tried and rather liked? Rome, of course, Rome 2. I think Rome 2 was actually the first one where I really sort of got it and really spent some time with it. But some of my friends, like, their favorite is Medieval 2. Like, as far as they're concerned, that is like the peak of the series. And as far as settings are concerned, I'm very interested in sort of Napoleon or Empire, because it happens to be this nice little, like, it's a really good setting for something like the Total War series, because clearly, like, especially if you're going to do a game about Napoleon, you need to have, like, artillery is a really, really important feature. But the ranged units, like, it wouldn't be like trying to do total modern warfare. Activision presents. That's going to be all ranged, right? Like, I can only imagine some sort of, well, even special operations, I suspect you'd have all ranged. Like, one of the factors that I think would make it difficult to do sort of a modern version of a Total War game is just the weaponry is so lethal now, right? Like, an individual soldier is just capable of a level of destruction that isn't really conceivable in any of the other settings for that series. But if you're playing a game, around the time that Empire is there, like, first of all, you've got an interesting state of the world in terms of the different alliances and the shifting allegiances as well. But also the technology is such that, the way the wars are being fought, but number two, just the idea of trying to close the lines and, like, bayonets and swords and cavalry charges are all still meaningful things. So it's actually, I think to a certain extent, it's almost an ideal setting, simply because it allows you to sort of put together a lot of different interesting units. But it's not at the point where, you're stuck with kind of the problem of doing a modern version of the game, which is, again, just the fact that any individual soldier is a terrifying killing machine, and so I have a feeling that would resemble something like it's the Company of Heroes. Like, it would probably resemble something like that a little bit more. I don't know, though, right? Like, I don't know how to make strategy games, so I'm sure they can. They can figure it out. They're clever people. But in any case, So, like, I try to go to these games that people really, really like. Like, again, if it's a friend's favorite game, I'm gonna want to follow through on that, right? Like, I don't think they have bad taste, but because so much effort has been put into the modern Total War games, how you doing, Aegis Sounder? Because there's so much effort that's been put into these modern ones in terms of just the interface and making it very approachable and very playable, even though these are, I'm sure, kind of the height of the series, it's not necessarily something that I can appreciate because I've been spoiled by the new things. Likewise, the first Mass Effect game that I played was Mass Effect 2. Now I know a lot of people kind of consider that to be the peak of the series anyway, but I also think that was a very special game for me because I had not played games for a while and I was kind of catching up. Like, Mass Effect 2 was an old game by the time that I played it, but I'd not really played anything for a few years. And certainly the stuff I was playing was not sort of AAA sort of stuff. So when I finally took a look at Mass Effect 2, it was like, my God, like, how long has this been going on? This is like playing a movie. This is awesome. But I'm sure there's, for a number of people, like, Mass Effect 1 probably has that feeling because that was the first time that they had a chance to play something like that. That was the first experience of that kind. It's also the theory that I have about the Dark Souls games, is that basically people's favorite Dark Souls game is the first one that they play, because every other Dark Souls game is just going to be a refinement of something that, you know, kind of gave them a completely different picture about what gaming could be. So all of that's really a long way of saying that I try as much as I can to play the earlier games in the series, but I've also kind of learned to acknowledge, and particularly with older stuff, that it may not be, like, it just may be that I've felt the influence of all the other games that have been inspired by these things, and that the window has sort of closed for me in terms of being able to appreciate it. And I think that's fine, right? Like, I don't know, there's like 7 Yakuza games out or something like that. Like, do I really feel that the story of the Yakuza series needs to be experienced from the first to the last? No, right? Like, I'm sure I'm going to be able to get by without understanding every nuance of the Yakuza series. But you know, I would like to appreciate it because it seems to be one that people really like. Oh, I'm glad I've got a comrade in arms on the first game theory. Anyway, what does CDP Arcades have to say to me? 7 is considered a perfect number. That game was also almost perfect. You can still improve, though. Try to reach the top 5 and win preem prizes. Okay, let's get paid.
You're tough as nails, V. A warrior without mercy. Considered a contract fulfilled. Well done.
I was trying to think of any other fun stories to tell. Oh, I should ask what people have been reading lately. So I can't remember if I mentioned, but I finished that Range book. It's very highly recommended. But I've moved on to Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull, who's one of the founders of Pixar. And I have read the Steve Jobs biography, so it's actually kind of interesting to hear the other half of the Pixar story.
V, I've got quite an unusual one for you. I need you to deliver Trevor Brass's remains to the address attached. The young life inside was snuffed out by a Wraith's bullet. Trevor's parents can't bury their son until he's back home. You can help make that happen. I have attached all the info you need.
I'm trying to remember if I've played Teleglitch or if it's just one I have in my library. Teleglitch is by Paradox, I think. Let me just take a quick look. Yes. So yeah, this is funny actually. I've played a little bit of this, but I wasn't even aware that there was lore for that game. That's interesting. So Vanguard's reading the Fool's Gold. That's not Charlie Strauss, is it? Nope, it's not. Not Charles Strauss. And then Captain and Commander series. 2 fantasy series you want to get through before you move on to Robert Ludlum's Covert 1. I've gotten a coworker reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I'm delighted by. All right, SOS Merc needed. Find Trevor's remains and deliver them to his family. There's a popular saying among the Aldecados, she who lives in the hearts of her loved ones can never truly die. Trevor Brass might indeed live on in memory, but if he had to keep his butt planted inside instead of dealing with wraiths, he'd just be plain alive. I digress. Yesterday, a man of mine spotted Trevor's car at a wraith's nest. The car had more holes than it started with, and the wraiths aren't known for taking prisoners. Trevor's relatives, as I mentioned, belong to the Aldecados. They aren't out for revenge. They just want to bury their son. Find Trevor's remains and help his family find peace. Jude Fisher. And you've been stuck on the Magician books by Charlie Holmberg. I think you mentioned that the last time that this question came out to create. I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember everybody's reading material from before, so I might be wrong with this. Reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy helped you understand the movie. Interesting. So the movie was your first experience, Aegis? I've had a few years where you're halfway through a book and could get more than one page every couple of days. Yeah. I mean, it's still good though, right? Like if you can make, in fact, both to what Vanguard and Takri said, right? Like being able to make even just a little bit of incremental progress every day, or, every week, whatever your time is. It's better than just sort of always keeping it as that thing you want to get into. I have a little bit of an incentive right now in the sense that my local, I feel like more libraries are doing this, particularly after COVID. But they've gotten rid of overdue fees. So effectively, if you are 3 weeks overdue, the book is considered lost and your account will be billed for the replacement. But what this has effectively meant for me is that I now have an additional 3 weeks to every borrowing that I do. So I've got, I think, a week left on 2 books that I want. So like I've actually worked out the number of pages and how many I need to read during a day to get through everything that I want to get through. And I noticed one of them does have like 2 people who want to read it. So I actually really need to like power through it as quickly as I can, while still, understanding it. Now it would be nice to like have used the time properly, but I was using the time getting through all the other books I've signed out. I kind of need to get through my stack before I sign any more out. Alternatively, if it's a book you can't find anywhere else, you can now buy the book from your local library. Yeah, well, I mean, it's not that hard for me to order books from from a bookstore, but the idea is definitely to actually, you know what, there's one at the Burnaby Library. There's a collection, it's called the Essential Ellison. So I have I got kind of lucky on this, but so there's a 35-year retrospective, the Essential Ellison, but what I was looking for was the 50-year retrospective. It's a follow-up. It's by Morpheus Press, and it's basically a big, omnibus of Harlan Ellison's short stories. So it was the first place that I read I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And the 35-year... Now, there's not that much of a difference, but there is a difference between the 35 and the 50-year retrospective. And at the Burnaby Public Library, which is in BC, near where I sort of used to live, actually near a place where I got mugged, but... so that book... is very good, and I'd signed it out a couple of different times, but I've never been able to find it anywhere else. And if you look for it on used bookstores, generally you're going to see it for hundreds of dollars, because not at the library, but near it. So the way I sort of wound up, so I kept seeing this 35-year retrospective, and I wasn't 100% sure what the difference was. But I found a place that was claiming to sell the 50-year retrospective for a not cheap amount, but something that I was willing to pay, particularly because it's such a difficult thing to find, apparently. And to be honest, I'm not sure why it's that hard to find. But anyways, neither here nor there. But yeah, sure enough, the thing arrived, and the package... First of all, I kind of knew something was up because the package was thinner than what I remembered the book being when I signed it out of the library. and open it up, and like sure enough, it's like the kind of yellowish cover rather than the red one of the 50-year retrospective. So the bookseller was pretty good about it. I mean, basically they just refunded the full amount, which I didn't really feel was necessary. Like I basically would have gone for, I would have gone for effectively the difference between like the premium I was paying for the 35-year retrospective and the 50. Like basically take the difference between what it would normally cost to get the 35-year, which I received, as opposed to the 50. But look, I'm not gonna complain about getting a full refund. So yeah, I still, I mean, like, I'm not the kind of person who's going to steal something from a library, right? But it is definitely one of the biggest things that I miss moving to kind of central Canada. Technically, I think I'm in Eastern Canada, but it's weird to call it Eastern Canada because, like, Eastern Canada to me is like near the Atlantic Ocean, and I don't know, like, I definitely feel that looking at the libraries I have access to. Now, admittedly, I also don't have access to my university library, so the comparison isn't that great. But the Vancouver Central Library is this beautiful building filled with books. Like, I don't know how many of you know what the CFA is, but like it's charter. I think was a chartered financial analyst. It's like a fairly, like, if you go, not that any of you are going to be like running in and buying mutual funds anytime soon, but if you take a look at like a mutual fund prospectus, usually the person managing the fund is probably going to have a CFA beside their name. So it's just like, if you want to be like a stock picker or financial analyst or something like that, it's just an expensive designation you can put by your name. Now, in the Vancouver Public Library, you can actually read all of the books. Like, they have the full set of books from level 1 through level 3 available to read. It's in the reference section. The old ones are available to sign out, but like, if you wanted, you could sit down in the and I have done this, by the way, sit in the library and read the full CFA. I haven't read the full CFA course, but like, just sit down with the books and read them and understand how financial analysis works, at least as far as that designation is concerned. You'd still, if you wanted the designation, you'd still need to pay to take the test. And if you pay to take the test, the course materials are part of the cost. But like that's the level. So in addition to like that great central library, all of the municipalities in the surrounding area, effectively you're allowed to borrow from them. So like, if you've never been to Vancouver, these names aren't going to mean anything, but like, if you live in Vancouver, you have like a Vancouver address, you need a card for the Burnaby Public Library, but you are still allowed to borrow from the Burnaby Public Library, even though your address is in Vancouver, which is a different municipality. And like, New West is another municipality. And again, if you have a Vancouver address, you can sign stuff out from the New West Public Library. And again, they don't share a catalog. You're going to have to go and do your searching. But effectively what it would mean is that I think in practical terms, I had 3 library cards for 3 different municipalities' libraries, plus access to my university library, which is a very well-stocked one. And in fact, the computer science library had stuff I couldn't find in any of the other 4. Is East Hastings what you need to stay? East Hastings is a very long road, but yes, it at least some point, and possibly still is, the poorest postal code in Canada. I actually had to be there on a few different occasions, and I mean, in fairness, right? Like, just because it's very poor and there's like, drug problems in that, it doesn't necessarily mean that's like, it's not like anarchy reigns there, right? But obviously what you're going to see in that part of town is very different from what you're going to see in other parts of Vancouver. Yeah, like that is the big thing. I mean, it's one of the reasons why like the first safe injection site in Canada wound up there. Which, interestingly enough, this is an old story now, but the company that ran that, I think it was like the Portland Hotel Society, had to have their board completely replaced because it turns out like so much of this money that was going to it to like do these, you would think, sort of very progressive kinds of things, like, you know, save injection sites and, you know, just generally trying to, I think they'd been working on some kind of like housing projects and things like that. But apparently there were like some of the compensation schemes were like paying for a full trip to Disneyland for some of the directors' families and things like that. And it's like, my God, like how much government money is going into this and how much is it ultimately just, you know, turning into an opportunity for people to enrich themselves off of, or at the very least, you know, have a very nice standard of living in order to, you know, instead of going into the works. Yeah, I mean, it's why you kind of want to be careful in terms of the charities that you support. But I still think it's important to do that kind of work. I mean, in the end, the province did step in and the board was replaced. But it's just a shame that happened because, you know, you need to. It's just one of these things that makes people very suspicious of, you know, quote unquote do-gooders. I don't necessarily think you need to sort of like wear a hair shirt to, you know, to help people out in that, but, you know, there is a good reason to like go and take a look into the expenses and like the ratio of the amount of money that's being spent on sort of maintaining a charity as opposed to going in. So like another one, like I think Milton Hershey's like such a great guy. Like every time I just read about him, I'm like, oh man, like what a nice man. Like in one sense, like really impressive. Like this is the opposite of what you see in Cyberpunk, right? Like you see this, and I realize this sort of stuff, like you start hearing like, oh, effective altruism, you know, we've reread Carnegie's Gospel of Wealth, blah blah blah, like all the while talking about why they don't read. So like obviously this has become a scam too, but like, you know, someone like Milton Hershey, who clearly has got a great mind for sort of business and industry, but uses that to do things like, you know, found the Milton Hershey School and such. And if, you know, so much of his wealth going into maintaining that charity. But I think ProPublica had done this investigation where ultimately what has happened is that there are a few people who are now in charge of it who are being a little bit less transparent than would normally be the case for you know, a charity like that. And of course the worry is that, you know, all of this wealth, all of this stuff that this guy basically, you know, spent his life building and then sort of turned it into this legacy for this very good thing in the world, is now sort of being used to sort of prop up this lavish lifestyle for the people who are lucky enough to sort of go in and run it. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think it was the Gates Foundation is sort of structured that way. It's essentially designed to spend all of the money within a certain period of time so that it does not wind up structuring itself to sort of perpetuate itself as opposed to distribute the money. Obviously, it's a very different way of thinking about wealth than what you'll be seeing from some of the people who've currently amassed it. Oh, now we've got the message. Oh, I just saw your message on Twitter. I was referring to. Well, I can mention it in the on Twitter. I was definitely thinking you mentioned a certain type that you've encountered. But yes, you'll be my first call when I set up the alternative account. Oh, those are mines. Ping is an unreasonably useful skill, although it does bug me a little bit that you can clearly see an outline of someone and not have it not have it properly tag them. Yeah, it's just a different genre, right? You take one set of skills and apply it to the other. It was, oh god, who, I was, I think it was Hideo Kojima who'd said this, right? It's like, you know, if you're good at one thing, you know, it's very easy to just adapt that to the other. I think it was like, you know, going from games to movies, and I'm like, having now seen someone play, I can't even remember, I think it was, well, one of them was Death Stranding, and then I know another one was, actually, honestly, I might as well just disarm them because I suspect I get a little bit of XP. And more importantly, I'm prone to doing stupid things. So, okay, guess I'm not allowed to on the others. But yeah, anyways, needless to say, I question. I mean, it's obvious he wants to make movies based on how endless those cutscenes are. But I perhaps disagree with the assertion that because you're good at making video games, you will be good at making movies. I think I can just do a system reset here. Same song. I have what I think is a really good line, but I feel is totally inappropriate to say on this stream. So, hang on. You're getting a DM in a minute. I realize that's like fairly tame, but for me, I don't know. That can be a fun private joke. All right, so I think I can do BD 5555. Then I get the E9 here, but then I don't have a 1C. So if I did BD 5555, there's no E9 there. BD 5555, no E9. BD 5555. E9, again, there's no 1C. There's no... Oh, hang on. So if I did BD 5555, E9... There we go. Yeah, System Reset is a preposterously powerful hack. I mean, obviously it takes a ton of RAM, so I'm not going to be able... I suspect it's probably got a very long reset, refractory period, to... Yeah, I'm going to be making more use of it. Whoa. I always hate it when it's like a shotgunner that sort of turns around and looks at me because it's the one person I don't want to be in close proximity to. Job reward. Trevor, I heard you're looking for something from that downed AV nearabouts the dry well. So happens I found it. Interested? Who the fuck is this? Trevor from the Aldecados. What's this you're on about? I'd be happy to sell. Where's your camp? I'd rather deliver it to you. If you're worried for your family, why not just trade with them? Because you all are looking for it. We don't want any trouble, just money. Excuse me. Consider it a finder's fee. What I found for you is really a prize. Well then, Trevor from the Aldecados, come collect your own prize. Okay, not crazy about where that wraith is looking, but we should be able to handle it. New item, fresh implant in stock, source, boy from the Aldecados, double rate. From Chuck's to Old Boyd, we'll discuss the rate when I come take a look. You're a winner! Congratulations! Greetings, user! Due to your continued use of the Kenoshi services, you were entered into a raffle and have been selected for one prize, Kenoshi Thermosense 9873. Ask for it by name. Reply to this email in the next 10 minutes to claim your prize. Hurry now, or another lucky user will be seeing the world in thermovision instead of you. Kenoshi team. Implants for cheap, cheap, cheap! From cyberware to encrypted. Huge savings on discounted secondhand cyberware. Don't miss out. Today's deal. Plastic Sinskin. Pink. Hand size M. Second gen. Used 1 week only. Near mint condition. Tech hair. Green. Shoulder length. Luminescent. Second gen. Moderate use. Occasional flickering. Faint cigarette smoke smell. Alloy feet. Chrome. Unpainted. Men's size 8. First gen. Light rust from lake water exposure. Price reduction due to lack of owner records. Synthetic calf muscle. Red. No casing. Mint condition. Second gen. Retrofit capable with older joint models. Items go fast, so buy now. Continue following us for the latest and best deals. Come on. I could do 255s, but does that get me to a 7A? It does. 7A BD, 7A, okay. Somebody sees me.
What's this?
See where this trail of blood leads?
I see you, Johnny. Thanks. Don't need a sixth sense to follow some blood.
This shouldn't be that hard to deal with. It's a bit of a long walk to the container, but... What I'm mostly looking to do is avoid having a body that one of the others can pick up. Or not pick up, detect. And I've tended to notice that when I'm moving bodies around, that's actually been the biggest trigger for enemies. But based on what I see here, keeping in mind that the ping's not perfect. Oh, for crying out loud, there was a dumpster right behind me. Nomad Cookbook from 2034. Aunt Mary Lou's Juicy Opossum Roast. 1 opossum. The fatter the better. 3 parsnips, 1 celery stalk, sin bacon, all of them pomace oil. Fry opossum and bacon together in oil until crisp, skimming any excess fat. Once browned, remove and set aside meat. Remove outer strings of celery, chop into small pieces, and boil in a separate pot. When soft, remove and blend with grated parsnip in the pan with remaining oil until you have celery parsnip mousse. Add meat to a roasting dish, then cover the mousse and bake at medium-high heat for 20 minutes. Remember that opossum pairs best with white turnip salad. Now you're prepared for the next big family dinner with this holiday crowd pleaser. Say it ain't soup. Snake meat, 2 types, water snake and rattlesnake. Chicken scraps, pork bones, fish head, optional, various other scraps, lemon leaves, seasonal or synthetic veggies, cornstarch, fresh ginger, sliced, dark soy sauce, various spices to taste. The most important thing to remember about snake soup is that it shouldn't taste like snake. Step 1, chop everything that needs chopping. Step 2, chuck everything in a pot and boil for at least 6 hours. Step 3, add more of anything as needed for taste. Step 4, stir in the cornstarch to thicken. Nerves, Vanguard Master, or caffeine? Okay, this is going to be a tricky one, but yeah, there we go. I keep forgetting that. So sorry, your meeting's Monday, right? Cool. So don't panic until Sunday. Yeah, they're in Sweden, right? Okay, so I should clear out the bad guys before I go too far. I know they're open, like they're kind of opening studios all over the place. So I think one's in Spain. Then there's one sort of more in the north of Sweden. I know Harebrained Schemes is based in Seattle. Mind you, that's like, oh, so if we're talking about like subsidiaries, what is it? Triumph is like Dutch. So I don't think that quite counts, but okay, so if I do BD1C55, then I can get the BD55. Well, no, BD55. Okay, so I do a 1C BD, that's fine. What's my next step after that? So 1C BD, then I need another 1C, which I don't have. I didn't really think this through, did I? Okay, so 1C BD. So if I do 1C, I can't get to the BD, but I can do the 55 to lock out the end. I mean, I can definitely say, like, Vanguard, probably the better thing is for us to, you know, chat offline in detail about it. But what I suspect will probably be true for your experience, and this is kind of, I mean, I'm in no position to be making, like, life choices for people, especially because I think most people watching may have some seniority on me. But what I think will probably be true, given that this is something that you're like building towards. Obviously, it's really important. This is really important to you right now and should be treated seriously. But at least when I kind of consider my own, I don't know, like moments in life, okay, I'm not 100% sure. what went wrong there. The ones that were like very significant, it wasn't maybe obvious to me at the time that those were the most significant ones. And of course, obviously the ones that I thought were monumental are things that I can't even remember like worrying about now. And I suspect I mean, again, this is your project and sort of your, like your decision in terms of where you want to go with all of this. But it seems to me like you are embarking on what will probably be a fairly long-term journey for you, right? Like, I don't think you just want to make one game. And I suspect that there are a few different paths and a few different things that you could do that would sort of satisfy your desire to create in that space. Now, it's very easy for me, who has absolutely nothing at stake, to say this, but what I think is probably going to be true, and we talked about this a little bit before, you know, to a certain extent, one of the things that you're getting out of this is training for what will hopefully be a long-standing career. Now, obviously, my hope is that that training comes in the form of like just shooting the lights out in every single stage and having, you know, having monumental success out of the gate. But on the other hand, like the stuff that's probably stressing you out here isn't I mean, you know your position better than I do, but like it doesn't strike me as necessarily fatal towards you achieving what your long-term goals are. And one of the reasons I say that is that probably, like when I think of people who are quite successful at it, at doing it, like I can remember in their case, the project that ultimately made their name and was like the reason why a few of you will have heard about it. They were about to miss payroll and fail to pay their mortgage before they did what was basically a Hail Mary Kickstarter. And that effectively put that project was ultimately the thing that sort of put that studio on the map. Now, obviously, I hope you don't wind up in a situation like that because, you know, that's stressful by any stretch of the imagination. But it does also sort of, you know, it does give me an indication in terms of how winding some of these roads can be in terms of people's individual experience and their sort of journey in terms of development. Trying to think of the best way. So I've got a 7A E9, but the problem here is that I don't have the 1C BD following it. On the bottom row 1C, I get a big stack of 1Cs. So if I did a 7A E9, 1C, 1C, 7A, then I would need another E9, which I don't get access to. One C, 7A. Yeah, no, I totally get it. And like the thing, it's like anything, right? Like obviously if you didn't care, you wouldn't be where you are. So it's good that you care about this stuff. But yeah, it's at least in terms of my own, you know, in terms of my own limited experience, I definitely get the perspective. Like the more I think of the things that felt like they were supposed to be big moments, the less they really turned out to be. Although, I mean, it is also fair to say that I think probably some of the more consequential choices I made. You know what? I think I'm gonna punt. So. Yeah, for sure. One thing I do tend to notice is that some of the more consequential decisions, for me at least, have the form of like, they're not dramatic. They're ones that have sort of put me in a more, like, something more resembling stasis. And of course, the difficulty is that the more comfortable you get with something, the harder it is to sort of get out of it. And I mean, there is, I think there's also certain temperament. So I probably don't really fit the model of like I would say that there are some entrepreneurial characteristics that I exhibit on my, on my worst days, where I become sympathetic to them, but I probably don't quite have that appetite for risk that seems to mark, the people who sort of basically do the sort of thing that you do. So, from that, sometimes winding up in a comfortable position can be a really good way of destabilizing something that I want to do, because again, a little bit like what you're describing, right? There's any number of contingency plans that I can come up with, but unless the world sort of serves up a catastrophe, it's not necessarily like there's no assurance that I'm really gonna I'm gonna know to sort of pull the trigger. Like, I was when I moved divisions where I work, I put up with absolute nonsense and just constant broken promises for years before I finally said, enough is enough, and moved to the place that I'm at.
Well, what do we have here?
Denrian, how you doing? Obviously, a different experience than what I got to see from you. How is everybody doing on your side? Sorry, let me take a quick second here. Actually, we have the... it's going quite well. I didn't have the... So I got this... actually, now's especially because we've got some new people coming in. Now's not a bad time for me to renew the disclaimer. I was given a copy of this on release from CD Projekt or GOG. I think it was GOG that officially gave it to me. But anyways, I've been playing this because I was given a thing of value. So consider yourself informed that every word here has been bought by a AAA video game. But I did hold off. So there's a bug in this which included when you put the disable copyrighted music. Fairly early on, one of the early brain dances in the game had a piece of copyrighted music, and this, of course, coincided with that time where like everything seemed to be getting spiked with copyright strikes on Twitch. So I was very conscious about that. And here you purchased your own copy like a sucker. Yeah. The story that I told earlier on is I do know a couple of people who work in games. In fact, one of them specifically on like the community management side. And her response when I told her is like, yeah, I'm doing Cyberpunk when it came out. It's like, oh yeah, you're gonna buy it. I'm like, no, they gave me a press copy. She's like, you? I'm like, what do you mean by that? And like, obviously we have a laugh about it because I'm a nobody, but it's very funny to have friends give a response like that. But in any case, I clearly fell through the screening gap. But because of that bug, I basically put the game on the shelf and didn't really pick it up until a while ago. And basically, I've been exhausted the last couple of weeks. I am eventually going to get to your shout out, but stuff like Against the Storm requires me to sort of think. So I used to do Against the Storm a lot on Fridays, but because Friday's a really nice chance for me to just like, I don't know, not think a whole lot, being able to play something like Cyberpunk is a nice little just opportunity to run around, play something that doesn't require a lot of focus, have a chance to chat with people. But this does bring me into Dendrian's broadcast. So Dendrian doesn't just play Against the Storm, which is a wonderful sort of roguelike city builder, which we played Monday most recently. Another fine product from Hooded. Well, Hooded Horse is the publisher, but very, very enjoyable game. But I can actually highly recommend Dendrian for their Against the Storm play, because they're very good at the game. So I definitely am very stubborn in terms of wanting to learn by burning my hand on the stove. But it's always wonderful to be able to recommend people who are either experts or have a gift for explanation, or both. And so I know there's a number of you who really liked Against the Storm, and I didn't get a chance to watch Dendrian too much when we rated them on Monday. But definitely a streamer I can recommend, both for good taste in games, but also for all of the qualities that I like in broadcasts in terms of just being able to explain their thought process and enjoy, and just basically present games that I enjoy very much well. So, yeah, it's the same reason why I got into Twitch, to be completely honest. So, do you mind if I ask some of the other things that you like to play? Obviously, you were kind enough to raid me, and that doesn't mean that you need to be obligated to stay, but given the fact that I didn't get a chance to interact with you too much on Monday, I'd certainly love to know a little bit more about your... well, I mean, as you say, you like to teach things, so I'd love to get a bit more of an idea of what you like to teach. I will confess, Cyberpunk is definitely outside of my usual thing, so I tend to play a bit more strategy. Because obviously I don't broadcast with a camera, and it's a lot easier to vocalize my my thought process during a strategy game rather than an action one.
All right, load him in the back.
Although
Time to go home, Trevor.
the main quest for this one usually gives us a nice chance to chat about things.
V, Trevor's parents can finally give their boy a proper burial. Thank you, truly. Contract closed.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. The big difference for me is that I feel like there's enough. I'll actually confess, as much as I've been enjoying doing the side missions and that, I do feel there's a little bit less in terms of the themes that I can talk about with some of these side quests. It's hit or miss, but like the gigs I'm noticing don't always align as well with some of the things that we first talked about. But you know. Obviously, it's not the game's job to give me things to talk about on stream, right? Like, the first role of the game is to be fun. Now, I'm actually kind of curious. I know this game wasn't as well... It was disappointing to me that it wasn't better received, but when you're talking about city builders and automation games, did you get a chance to try out Industries of Titan? Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say. People are starting to ask about you, the kind of people who have bigger snakes to fry. Starting from now, will be accepting their high-value custom. Congratulations, you deserve it. You like the Tetris-esque building part? That's good, yeah. One of the things I like the most, actually I think I found a streamer called Durillion, who incidentally is... streaming right now, so that's another shout out that I can give. I think they're playing a rhythm game right now, but while we're building connections between other broadcasters. Drillian does did Industries of Titan, and I found them through that. And I think it what was it? Dare Drop was something that Brace Yourself Games had used. Actually, interestingly enough, the Phantom Brigade video is still playing on their website. So for those of you asking whether or not that was going to wind up on YouTube, I wanted to wait until they're not putting it on their Steam page anymore before I ask if I can put that on YouTube. So I've not forgotten, just it's on longer than I was thinking. But yeah, one thing that made me feel a lot better about Industries of Titan was when I watched people stream it on Twitch, they were genuinely enjoying it. And that was obviously in contrast to a lot of the conversations happening on either the Steam forums or the reviews or even the Discord to a certain extent, where people were criticizing it for not being the game they thought that it should be. Because, again, are there things that I think the game might have done differently? Yes. No game's perfect. Some of my favorite games aren't perfect. I love the Civilization series, and the fact that they've been able to sustain 5 sequels to Civilization is kind of an example about how there has been room for improvement in... Well, obviously I've not played every Civilization game, but you get the idea, right? It's a clear demonstration that there has been room for improvement in each of the series, which I love so much. Each of the entries in the series that I love so much. But yeah, no, it was definitely a breath of fresh air to kind of see people play the game and really enjoy it. Because I feel like it was a better game than the reception it got. And of course, every time people are like, bad game, wait till they, do 6 updates or something like that. Well, obviously the game's not going to get updates if people are, not supporting it. Not to imply that people need to like put money into a game to see that it gets, continued development, but just I'm not entirely sure. Like, again, I feel like it's better to review a game for what it is as opposed to, this image that you had in your head. Now, I've never heard of the Wandering Village Decree. Could you sell me on it? In the meantime, I'm going to see if this is a mission above my pay grade. We have enough to buy the vehicle, but I'm going to try and push ahead with the side jobs, especially just because I've been babbling on so much. I do rather like, so Mr. Maloney, some of you will know him in chat as K-Money. I do like his recommendation to sort of stop and smell the roses and check out all the side jobs. The only thing is, again, because there's not as much thematically for me to talk about, I always feel a little bad. Like, one thing I did like about doing some more of the story stuff was these nice little opportunities to, look at the world of Cyberpunk. We'd have a little bit more substance to sort of chew on, and to be able to sort of talk about what had happened to this character, or some of the ideas that are being represented in the world. Oh, actually, I got Edward Deming's book. I signed that out of the work library. So maybe we can get into that.
Hey, I need your help. I've lost contact with Benedict McAdams and the driver who was supposed to get him out of town. Head to the coordinates I gave you. See what you can find. More details attached.
But yeah, no, it's the one thing that I've had a little difficulty with, because like obviously some of the gigs have been a little too tough for me to overcome. Generally, if I'm running into people with skulls over their head, that's a signal that I'm doing things wrong. And as neat as the gigs are, some of them are definitely better story-wise than others. And so, normally there's this nice opportunity to sort of take the time and, drive through and see where everything goes. And in this case here, I sometimes have a little bit of dead air, or we wind up talking about the books that we're interested in and such. So Takri says, poison gas all over the world. You find a big guy you can build on the back of as he roams around. So you got to go build up your village and keep your big guy healthy. That sounds really good. Actually, if you don't mind, I'm just going to take a quick second to look this up. No, sorry, I shouldn't. I'm here to stream, but I will take a look. Waiting for it to come. Oh, so it's early access right now. All right, SOS Merc needed. Objective: find Benedict McAdams from Clement Street. A fixer's worth no more and no less than their last promise. And I promised Benedict McAdams that I'd get him out of town once he checked off a job for me. Benedict's one devil of a pro, just 6 hours in of taking the job, and the Councilman McLean's heartbeat for the last time, a fat fish I'd had dangling on my line too long. The risk of a slip-up was high, so before he set in, Benedict installed a GPS in his biomon so I could have an eye in the sky on him, as it were. This slickster didn't work alone, mind you. He had a driver, Jason Wildriver. The problem is, instead of hauling quick across the border, Jason went off route. Something here stinks worse than McLean's fishy corpse. Find them and bring me Benedict, and I'll find him a new driver. We're used to digressions in very true, but not all digressions are created equally, right? So actually, I am going to take a second here just to get that book that I was talking about, because I actually really like some of his opening lines. So if you can just give me a quick second here, I'm going to grab this. So in a very indirect... Actually, sorry, there was another thing I wanted to say, too. So Vanguard Master, you were asking about East Hastings. There is a rumor, and I don't know how true this is, because I don't know how much of the art direction of Blade Runner ultimately is a reflection of the underlying story. The important thing to remember, of course, is that by the time Ridley Scott and the creative team on Blade Runner were working with the Philip K. Dick story,
Okay.
Nope. It had already been adapted by Hampton Fancher.
So, did you think it over?
But there is a rumor that at least
of course.
part of the...
Can't fit it in your budget.
Okay, this is hilarious.
Too scary as some for all the...
Okay. But yeah, so there's a rumor. I do know Philip K. Dick did spend some time in Vancouver, and I think it suggested that some of the some of it was an inspiration for some of his works, particularly what would be seen in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. But again, it's almost one of these things which is sort of like, I want to believe it's true, but there's again a few steps between, writing Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which is very different from Blade Runner, and the fact that, like, let's face it, Ridley Scott has a very clear idea of what makes for a good movie in a particular visual style. And Jordan Cronenweth's cinematography also is a really big part in terms of what made that, that movie look the way that it did. So there's the question, again, how much of this was Dick's writing and how much of this was the team behind the film. But anyways, the thing I wanted to talk about was W. Edwards Deming, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but I would argue that if there's one person who's responsible for why there are so many, like, massive Japanese conglomerates in Cyberpunk, it's basically this guy's fault. So W. Edwards Deming was a statistician, and he was sort of brought into Japan to sort of help with I said sort of like 3 times there. He was brought into Japan to help with the reconstruction effort. I believe he was actually specifically brought in for the census. But he wound up thinking a lot about production. The other thing that's worth remembering it's a very different way from how we think about Japanese manufacturing now. But in terms of quality, the idea of made in Japan was like the worst possible insult you could see on a product. Like, made in Japan effectively meant that it was the shoddiest, cheapest thing that you could possibly get. I realize that there are a few labels now where people will be like, oh yeah, that's probably not very good, but like there's just no proper conception in terms of how negative of a sign that was. So one of the things that Deming wound up sort of talking about during his time in Japan was this idea of, I can't even remember what let me just see if it's got the name inside here. There was a name for it, and it's been turned into something else. Actually, I bet if I go to the Wikipedia, it'll say what it is. It's like total quality something. Actually, you know what? The easiest thing for me to do here would just be to read the Japan section in the Wikipedia entry. So, in 1947, Deming was involved in early planning for the 1951 Japanese census. The Allied powers were occupying Japan, and he was asked by the United States Department of the Army to assist with the census. He was brought over at the behest of General Douglas MacArthur, who grew frustrated at being unable to complete so much as a phone call without the line going dead due to Japan's shattered post-war economy. While in Japan, his expertise in quality control techniques, combined with his involvement in Japanese society, brought him an invitation from the Union of Japanese Scientists and Engineers, JUSE. JUSE members had studied Schuart's techniques, and as part of Japan's reconstruction efforts, they sought an expert to teach statistical control. From June to August 1950, Deming trained hundreds of engineers, managers, and scholars in SPC and concepts of quality. He also conducted at least one session for top management, including top Japanese industrialists of the likes of Akio Morita and co-founder of Sony Corp. Deming's message to Japan's chief executives was that improving quality would reduce expenses while increasing productivity and market share. Perhaps the best known of these management lectures was delivered at the Mount Hakone Conference Center in August of 1950. A number of Japanese manufacturers applied his techniques widely and experienced heretofore unheard of levels of quality and productivity. The improved quality, combined with lowered cost, created a new international demand for Japanese products. Deming declined to receive royalties from the transcripts of his 1950 lectures, so JUSE's board... Google automated message. Thank you very much for the follow. So JUSE's board of directors established the Deming Prize in December 1950 to repay him for his friendship and kindness. Within Japan, the Deming Prize continues to exert considerable influence on the disciplines of quality control and quality management. In 1960, the Prime Minister of Japan, Nobusuke Kishi, acting on behalf of Emperor Hirohito, awarded Deming Japan's Order of the Sacred Treasure second class. The citation on the medal recognizes Deming's contributions to Japan's industrial rebirth and its worldwide success. The first section of the meritorious service record describes his work in Japan. 1947, Rice Statistics Mission member. 1950, assistant to the Supreme Commander of the Allied Powers. Instructor in sample survey methods in government statistics. The second half of the record lists his service to private enterprise through the introduction of epochal ideas such as quality control and market survey techniques. Among his many honors, an exhibit memorializing Deming's contributions and his famous red bead experiment is on display outside the boardroom of the American Society for Quality. He was inducted to the Automotive Hall of Fame in 1991. So I guess I can't find the name for the quality control. Oh, Total Quality Management. So the drawback here is that total quality management was eventually turned into Six Sigma, and like Six Sigma is kind of notorious. I know like GE made a big deal of it, and like, you know, they've got these weird like, you know, Six Sigma black belt and all of these things. And again, it's like you have a good idea, and then it winds up being sort of over applied and systemized in a not very effective way, and you know, it's kind of unfashionable to talk about this stuff now. But it's really important to remember that there is a reason this guy is getting national prizes from Japan. You need to think about where Japan was prior to him going there. And again, not even necessarily to help with industry in the way that he wound up doing. But also sort of the willingness of these Japanese companies to adopt those techniques, and particularly at a time when the States wasn't. I mean, to a certain extent, I think you could maybe say that the States was enjoying the fact that they were the one country that didn't have, you know, bombed out factories. So his book Out of the Crisis, which was I believe this says copyright 1982. So in this case here, you know, you've got stagflation running around. The reason he's calling it Out of the Crisis is to try and help the United States. Essentially, basically, people are looking at declining productivity in the United States, formerly this, you know, manufacturing powerhouse. They're looking at Japan, who's buying everything up. They're, you know, absolutely killing everyone in terms of the manufacturing that they're doing. And this was his effort to write a book to try. I mean, I think he said he wanted for his epitaph, you know, let me see the exact. When asked toward the end of his life how he would wish to be remembered in the U.S., he replied, "I probably won't even be remembered." After a pause, he added, "Well, maybe as someone who spent his life trying to keep America from committing suicide." So I've not read all of Out of the Crisis, but I really enjoyed the opening paragraph, which, if you will permit me, I'm going to opening paragraphs. If you'll permit me, it's going to be a little long, but I think it's worth it here. So this is the preface. The aim of this book is the transformation of the style of American management. Transformation of American style of management is not a job of reconstruction, nor is it revision. It requires a whole new structure from foundation upward. Mutation might be the word, except that mutation implies unordered spontaneity. Transformation must take place with directed effort. The aim of this book is to supply the direction. Need for transformation of governmental relations with industry is also necessary, as will be obvious. Failure of management to plan for the future and to foresee problems has brought about a waste of manpower, of materials, and of machine time, all of which raise the manufacturer's cost and price the purchaser must pay. The consumer is not always willing to subsidize this waste. The inevitable result is loss of market. Loss of market begets unemployment. Performance of management should be measured by the potential to stay in business, to protect investment, to ensure future dividends and jobs through improvement of product and service for the future, not by the quarterly dividend. It is no longer socially acceptable to dump employees on the heap of the unemployed. Loss of market and resulting unemployment are not foreordained. They are not inevitable. They are man-made. The basic cause of sickness in American industry and resulting unemployment is failure of top management to manage. He that sells not can buy not. The causes usually cited for failure of company are costs of startup, overruns on costs, depreciation of excess inventory, competition, anything but the actual cause. Pure and simple bad management. So, I mean, there's a few more pages of this, but I love this start of a book because you've got this angry statistician ripping in to, you know, and let's face it, in the tech industry, we're seeing a lot of this right now. You know, Mark Zuckerberg just fired another 10,000 people, or, you know, however many were in the Facebook layoffs. Microsoft, again, another huge round of layoffs. Twitter, I mean, Twitter is doing the thing that you'd see inside of the 1980s. You have all of these, you know, people at the top who it's quite good. Like here's the thing to remember, Google Automated, and to everybody who has sort of a mind for management stuff, right? Deming is talking about an economy which is very heavily focused on industry and manufacturing. And so there is some there is some debate as to how useful these kinds of lessons are in terms of what we're experiencing right now, which is sort of a service economy, lots of knowledge work. I do think there is still something that you can pull out of it, but like the thing is that I like reading this, one, because I'm playing Cyberpunk, and like number one, it is just kind of awesome to hear like an angry statistician just dropping bombs on management, because you tend not to read that a whole lot in book. That's the preface, by the way. Like, he does not let up as the book goes on. But like any other book recommendations for similar adjacent topics? So this is going to be a little bit of a this is going to be an indirect way. This may not even necessarily be what you're looking for, but I'm going to recommend it anyway. Where I first found out about this book was a book called The Lady Tasting Tea by David Salzberg, and it's actually about statistics. So like Deming doesn't show up until like halfway through the book, but what I really enjoyed about The Lady Tasting Tea is I thought it was an eminently readable introduction, not just to statistics, but specifically why statistics has kind of gained the importance and the role that it has in sort of how science is performed and how the world works today. And it goes it's got some like fairly contemporary stuff in it. And like it starts with a good anecdote. So the lady tasting tea from the book is actually the story of Roland Fisher, who's a major influence in terms of the development of statistics. And he and a number of Cambridge professors were all sort of, at a garden party. And one of the this is a big this is a big British thing, right? Whether or not you put the milk in before the tea. George Orwell wrote about this. If anybody wants to hear the tea essay from George Orwell again, I'm happy to read that again, but I will go to just chatting for it. But yeah, she was claiming that she could taste the difference, and everybody's kind of reacting the way that they usually do. No, that's nonsense. There's no way to go about it. Yeah, actually, I'm in the same boat as you, Vanguard Master. I was terrified when I went to the UK because people asked me to make some tea, and they expected milk to go into it, and I never drink it with milk, so I didn't know how much to put in. But I got a passing grade, so that was manageable. But in any case, so Fisher, being the statistical genius that he is, actually sat down with the proposition and thought, well, how many cups of tea would we need to sort of randomly assign to determine whether or not she was able to properly identify which ones were prepared with the milk going in first or second. The lady tasting tea? Excellent. So, now, interestingly enough, Fisher... So this actually wound up being a very interesting application that it's a good illustration in terms of how we actually wind up doing sort of hypothesis testing today. Fisher does not record what the result was, but apparently someone who was there claims that she got every single one correct. So apparently you can taste the difference. But, again, the thing here is that I know you were looking for Deming going hard on American management, and for that I can't really think of an immediate replacement or alternative to Out of the Crisis. And it may even be that, the book wears out its welcome, because it's a couple hundred pages. It may even wear out its welcome after those opening passages, but that's fine. I mean, you don't need to, if the book, you're not getting something out of the book, you don't need to read it all the way through. But because I found out about Deming through through The Lady Tasting Tea, and I found it a very enjoyable read, and one on what I think is a fairly important topic. I think we could stand to be a lot more statistically literate. It's a book that I've tended to recommend quite a bit. I should also mention Aegis definitely is, in this case they had a film recommendation, but Aegis is better on the spiritual and philosophical end of the spectrum. So there's a wide range of readers here. I'm gonna guess though nobody wants to hear the Orwell T essay, so we're gonna read the archived conversation between Jason Wildriver. But yeah, just to recall us to the original point. It seems like one of these sort of like almost clickbaity kind of, hey, no worries, Vanguard Master. I know it's really late where you are, so thanks a lot for hanging out. Try not to stress out too much about your meeting on Monday. I am going to follow up on your presentation, and I mean, not that you need me to, but like, I want to do right by that. Yeah, I do hope you get some rest, and I don't know, just treat yourself, like, do the work, but make sure you do something this weekend to like remind you of the like, you want to do this stuff so that you can support a certain kind of lifestyle. So, and that lifestyle probably does not involve worrying every day. So I hope you're able to like find that balance. But yeah, like obviously this can come off as sort of like a clickbaity sort of a thing, but like, again, if you consider the context under which so much cyberpunk stuff was made, like there is a reason why there are always these Japanese conglomerates buying everything up, because that was something that was being observed in the world at the time that that these stories were being written. And, you know, obviously there are concerns about globalization and, you know, growing inequality and such in these stories, and they're ones that have carried on. Like cyberpunk is not just a visual aesthetic, cyberpunk's not just an aesthetic, it is a series of ideas, and ones that still find an expression today. You know, some of the labels have maybe changed, but I think it's fair to say that we have a number of concerns that have only become more relevant as these, you know, stories as the years and decades have gone by. But this theme sounds like we saw in a film called Branded. I don't think I've seen Branded, but I always get recommendations from you, Aegis, so I know to keep a notepad by my, well, not just you, but from chat in general. I know to keep a notepad by my computer now. But yeah, understanding that context, you know, the next question that you ask is, well, why was it that this was, like, was Nintendo that cool? I guess that Nintendo's kind of anachronistic for the time. I guess Nintendo would have come in a little bit later. Actually, this is another one you may find interesting. I was talking about Range. Range has a chapter on Nintendo, which was fascinating. So, in addition to the fact that I think Range is a really good book about sort of like thinking and, you know, where some of our strengths in terms of being able to come up with novel ideas come from. If you're interested in gaming, the chapter on Nintendo is really informative. It basically is dealing with how it went from a card game company to a to the video game manufacturer that we know, and specifically why Nintendo has always been a laggard in terms of the technology, and how that's actually a source of its competitive advantage, right? So like nobody gets a Nintendo console for cutting edge graphics; they get it for other factors. And yet Nintendo has been able to basically make its own way through an increasingly competitive industry. And Range does a really good job of sort of explaining a few of the reasons why it has the form that it does. Yeah, very much so. And I mean, the thing that's also interesting about this, right? So again, like in terms of W. Edwards Deming, it's not even just this sort of like, you know, the Americans claiming that, you know, he was really important. It's the Japanese recognizing his influence. Like the important thing to remember is that it's almost like the British general who effectively was the intellectual force behind the Blitzkrieg, JFC Fuller, who quite sadly, like, again, you don't want to raise people up as a figure like that. I mean, he essentially ended his years feeling the wrong side won World War II. Also an occultist, so those of you who like the Cultist Simulator stuff, there's a lot to dig into there. But yeah, I mean, effectively, Britain introduced sort of the theory that would become Blitzkrieg, but obviously they weren't the country that applied it. And likewise, in a analogous way, the United States had W. Edwards Deming. They had this knowledge, this technology in the form of, quality control and all of the different factors that would lead to growing market share to essentially build up on their success that they had from the end of World War II. And yet it was Japan and their willingness to adopt this technology. And when I say technology, I'm not referring to like computers or something like that. I mean technology as in a way of doing things, back to the, the Greek word techne. And it led to such a level of success. I mean, Toyota is probably the best example of this. It led to a point where Deming has to write a book basically upbraiding American management for being asleep at the switch, like essentially blaming these workers for their own failures, their inability to manage their businesses, and the fact that consumers were no longer willing to subsidize the waste because they had superior Japanese products to buy. So the other thing that's so interesting about this, and the reason why I like taking all of this time to talk about it, is you actually also still see some of this material, right? There's some of this has its origins in World War II, and again, the fact that Japan's industry was just leveled. Think of the character of Saburo Arasaka in Cyberpunk 2077, someone who's essentially, conducting this centuries-long revenge campaign for the humiliation of his homeland in the Second World War. That essentially he's continuing to fight that old war on economic grounds. And, how much of this is intentional, I don't really know. But it's hard to see it as just pure coincidence. And again, the more you sort of read the history, and not just necessarily in terms of the influences of these authors, but all of the different ways that you can sort of see how history played out and how it led to these conditions that are being picked up by these authors and turned into stories. And again, it may be like, Mike Pondsmith, it would be wonderful if he kind of came in and said, yes, this is exactly what I was thinking when I made Cyberpunk. Just to be able to see all of these interesting ideas and to be able to understand, this is one of the reasons why reading history and reading some of these old books can be so, so rewarding, is that I don't have the benefit of having grown up, to experience these sorts of things. I mean, obviously we're all experiencing now what it's like to be in a high inflation environment. That's a very 80s and 70s and 80s sort of thing. Because I mean, essentially for, I think, most, if not all of my lifetime, I've been living in a period of fairly stable prices. There have been financial crises, but the financial crises have generally caused prices to go down, not to go up. But yeah, you can look at all of these stories, and whether you go from Nintendo or whether you go from Japan adopting these manufacturing techniques and going from sort of the you never want to buy a Japanese product to this envy of the industrial world, all of these things are translating into the games that, I mean, some of the most popular games that we're playing today. Yep. No, I mean, definitely, it comes down to the way I originally posed it was like, why do you always have these Japanese conglomerates running around buying everything? And it's essentially because that was actually happening. But the interesting question isn't necessarily to say this is what was going on when these stories were being created. The more interesting one is, what were the circumstances that led to that being observed? And as it happens, that is a very interesting story in its own right. So I'm going to read what Aegis said here, and I am really actually going to get to the archive conversation now. So there was one American in the American Revolution known as the Fox. One tactic he would use was feeding his troops some vinegar and then luring the British to follow them into the swamps. The troops he commanded would escape, but because of the lack of making their bodies a wasteland to the organisms, the British would die of poisoning. Oh, interesting. Well, also, wasn't the American Revolutionary War where they mandated vaccination to essentially stop the attrition through, through disease? I feel like that was something Washington did. I'm sorry, I'm Canadian, so I don't get the full American Revolution story, except anything that I read on my own. Although at another time, I'll tell this story another time, there is an indirect way that Canada is responsible for the American Revolution. It wasn't called Canada at the time, of course. Jason Wildriver, heard you're looking for Ben McAdams. Well, you're in luck. Got him right here, and he isn't going anywhere. Jason Wildriver, could be yours for the right price. Jigmeet Dorji, how much? I want 5 times more than that lead head from last year. Final offer. I'll relay it to my superior, authorized to make these kinds of decisions. We'll be in touch. Right, fucking Militech always calls the shot, don't they? We certainly don't let the shots call themselves. I hope they never fix this. Alright. I'm gonna steal some goodies, and then we will, Oop. Oh no, that was the turret. I know I've recommended this before because we've got a few new bodies in the channel. For those of you who like Cyberpunk stuff, apparently this has been made available on HBO Max. But there's a rather good Catherine Bigelow film produced by James Cameron called Strange Days. And there's actually a character in this game called Lenny Nero, which is the character Ralph Fiennes plays in that film. Now, Lenny Nero in Cyberpunk is very different from the Lenny Nero in Strange Days, so I wouldn't recommend it for that connection. But I think it's a very good Cyberpunk story, and one that didn't seem to be that financially successful. Like, Catherine Bigelow basically didn't have a hit until, I guess, she did, was it Roadhouse? I don't know, like, she kind of, it felt like she was in the wilderness for a really long time until The Hurt Locker. And then, I mean, she followed that up with Zero Dark 30, which is also really good, so certainly got out of it. But yeah, I feel like Strange Days is still something that doesn't quite get the respect that it deserves. So if you happen to like stories like this, definitely recommend Strange Days, however you get a chance to see it. I think I wound up getting it like on a disc from the library, but I believe it is now on one of the streaming services, which is good. Alright, I'm trying to think how I can get this E9 1C1C while still recovering something else. I don't know if I can, so maybe I just eat it and... E9 1C1C BD... yeah. That is the 90s Strange Days, yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure it's it's obviously got references to the Rodney King beating, so that's early 90s, I think. I'm trying to think. Ralph Fiennes, Angela Bassett, I think, Tom Sizemore, and this is why we have the internet. Let me take a look here. 1995 cyberpunk thriller film directed by Catherine Bigelow, written by James Cameron and Jay Cox. Oh, I didn't know Jay Cox wrote it, or co-wrote. Starring Ralph Fiennes, Angela Bassett, Juliette Lewis, Tom Sizemore, Vincent D'Onofrio, and I have no idea who Michael Wincott is, but apparently Canadian actor with a deep, raspy voice. Alien Resurrection. Oh, I think I know who this guy is. I think it was in The Crow as well. Sorry, I'm talking like 30-year-old movies. Yeah, he was in The Crow. Clearly, The Crow is the original comic book. Well, there's probably comic book movies before The Crow, but it's not all Marvel. But if it's the guy who I think it is, it's like the crime lord in the adaptation of The Crow. Which for some reason I'm going to assume more people have seen than Strange Days.
Huh. A new face. See, Militech's been investing in young talent. So, you here to take me on a little field trip?
Why'd Militech want to buy you off of Jason?
What? You missed the memo? That NCC crook McLean. Militech bought him off. Drafted bills he passed without a blink. I took the bastard out. Now they're desperate to find a fall guy. Don't want the NCPD looking too close into the matter.
As upstanding citizens would do.
Mm-hmm. Militech's gladly gonna pin me for a heap other things, since I'm already here. I can only surmise I'll be so desperate as to end up taking my own life, as they say.
Sorry to hear that. I'm here on Dakota's behalf.
For Christ's sakes, now you're telling me? I loathe it, this whole playing tough in the face of death thing.
All right, let's get you out of here.
Oh, shit. I feel like I haven't used my legs for a straight month.
It says there's a terminal here somewhere. Maybe upstairs? Oh no, I think I know where it's gonna be. I never look up. Even in Portal 2, where they put a big yellow arrow telling me to look up, I don't look up. Okay, 55, 55, 55. Okay. We'll play it by ear. I spend too much time thinking about these things and fail to deliver. So BD 55. So. Is he in the car with me? I guess he is.
You know what I miss most in that basement?
Booze, cigs,
Melons. Those sweet honey melons Dakota folks got growing on genetic mismatch. Miles above any sin melons you can find.
Okay.
I sat there thinking, what I wouldn't give one taste of that sweet, sweet melon. Of course, that prick Jason entertained the thought.
Dakota's melons. Is this some kind of a metaphor or something? I'll see if this one runs me over.
Hey, McAdams, over here!
Starkey. It's been years.
You look like shit.
I'm a bit indisposed. Looks like you'll have to be my chauffeur.
V, FYI, Dakota's sending over your payment.
Nova, thanks. Have a good one.
As much as I like this vehicle, I think I'm gonna... Nope. Got intel that Benedict's safe. I hope this time the driver doesn't disappoint. Thanks, V. Gig closed. I think I might buy that car now. So, this would probably normally be the time that I wrap up, but you've all been very patient with me as I go on digressions, so I think I'm going to buy whatever car I can. I can afford a better one, but let's get the little mule for start. Even if we just still... Actually, I think I'll probably stick on the bike for a little while. And then maybe we'll do one other gig after... Unless it winds up taking forever, in which case I probably need to. Well, thank you, Google Automated Message. Obviously, without the camera, the only thing I've really got going for me is, you know, whatever I'm saying, so... I do sometimes wish I could come up with a slightly better balance between the game and the digressions, but... I do tend to notice, especially with a story-based game like Cyberpunk, if I pause the topic too many times for dialogue, then I sort of lose the plot. So, always room for improvement, but I do, especially when, like, the big thing is that I can kind of ramble on about any given topic, right? But one of the things that I really like is when someone sort of says, oh, hey, that's kind of interesting. Tell me more. So I love it when, you know, people like yourself kind of let me know that we're following an interesting thread. Because, you know, sometimes, like, look, I'll put it to you this way. If I sat everyone down, right, and said, hey, we're going to talk about, like, 1970s, 1980s manufacturing procedures as part of the stream today, do you want to tune in? I think most people are gonna say, you know what, I've really been meaning to check out this the city builder that takes place on the back of a giant. You know, we'll catch you on the next broadcast. But you know, within a certain context, suddenly this topic can become, you know, an entry point to maybe some things that we're interested in. Because clearly we are, right? We're still playing Cyberpunk games even though they're like 40-year-old stories. I think even, you know, like, I think Gibson started writing Neuromancer probably, you know, early, mid-70s. And I mean, as far as he was concerned, he was kind of following in the footsteps of William S. Burroughs. I don't necessarily think that he thought he was sort of revolutionizing science fiction. So there's obviously something about these topics that we still find interesting, even though by most standards they're like, LOL, these stories are for old people. So in some ways, right, like, you know, even if it just comes down to being able to say, like, where does Arasaka come from? You know, other than Mike Pondsmith's head, right? What were the circumstances that are leading to so many of these stories having these seemingly unstoppable Japanese conglomerates, you know, taking over? And, you know, that happens to be a gateway to talk about, you know, the contributions of, you know, an American statistician in post-war Japan. So, well, some of us are. Yeah, sorry. I'm not trying to make some kind of like ageist statement here, right? Like, but yeah, it would be fair to say I suspect, like, probably if you think of the target market for Cyberpunk 2077, you're probably not thinking of people who would have read, like, Neuromancer when it first came out. that's my guess at least. Like, I will also say, like, I actually think that's a really good market, right? Like, why do I think we're primed for a BattleTech renaissance? I mean, obviously now's a good time to be into BattleTech stuff, right? Because you got MechWarrior 5. They've said that there's some kind of a new product being made. MechWarrior Online's a thing. There was a wonderful BattleTech adaptation, Harebrained Schemes, founded by Jordan Weissman, so one of the people responsible for that IP. But the reason why you should be into BattleTech as a game designer is that older people have money and they have nostalgia. And you combine those two things, and that's a recipe to get that money. So, you know, to a certain extent, obviously David's jacket is so much cooler, but I gotta follow the stats. Yeah, so I'm definitely not trying to. I'm definitely apologies if that's coming off as like really dismissive, but yeah, like when you think of all of the stuff that people are getting sort of misty-eyed over in terms of the genre, right? It's all of it's like 30, 40 years old. It's definitely stuff that I'm able to experience, not because, I ran out for opening day. I remember watching, Strange Days, the first day it became available on Netflix. Obviously Netflix didn't exist. It was HBO Max that it was premiered on. But yeah, no, like I don't get to kind of claim one of the reasons why I point this out. There was a BattleTech stream where I'm into BattleTech. I like it a lot. But there was someone who kind of wanted to play the veteran card, and they were very like, I was there at the time, and I know what this meant. And I'm like, follow the Roman Empire. Like, you don't need to have played first edition to kind of get what these stories are about. But yeah, like, in the end, I don't kind of get to claim sort of the authority of the experience, right? Like, the closest I've ever gotten to Cyberpunk, the role-playing game, was I rather like Android Netrunner. And I did have... I don't even know where I got it from, but I did wind up with like a starter deck of the original Richard Garfield Netrunner that game was adapted from, and apparently the setting for that was Cyberpunk 2020. But even then, like, that's a pretty winding way to get to the source material here. So yeah, I mean, in the end, I can only sort of appreciate this stuff sort of through reading, and I mean, in the end, following interests, right? Like, clearly I'm interested enough in stats stuff that I read The Lady Tasting Tea, read The Lady Tasting Tea, get kind of interested in the Deming chapter, know a little bit about Nintendo, know a little bit about Cyberpunk stuff, realize, oh, holy crap, this is the guy who led to this big difference in terms... obviously, the Econ connection was also a point of interest there. And this has obviously given me a perspective on cyberpunk stories that I wouldn't necessarily have had if I just, picked up Cyberpunk Red off of DriveThruRPG because I thought the video game was interesting. Not to say that I wouldn't have learned this stuff through other means, but it is a really good example about how this gaming stuff...
Davey, I have some new work for you. A certain item needs to be salvaged from the landfill before some gonks chop it to pieces. I've attached some more details for you.
Winding, but like, yeah. Well, and this is the thing, right? Like, one of the things... This kind of brings me back to something that Dendrian said in terms of why they like streaming, as a chance to teach games. I have nothing to teach people about Cyberpunk 2077. But my favorite game by far is Civilization. And one of the reasons why I like it so much is that it wound up sort of laying this foundation for what would kind of later become intellectual interests and reasons like why I read books and why ultimately I went to university. Because out of high school, I basically went to a film career. I, did work in film for a few years, but eventually, mostly due to a writer's strike. But like it took me a while to sort of connect with the more academic and intellectual side that I had. It would be fair to say. But because, like, if you read the Civilopedia, I think the division between, like, game mechanics and history, it's like 1/3 game mechanics, 2/3 history last time I checked. I wrote an article on this, but actually I don't know what happened to that publication. I should probably follow up with them. But, like, to me, some of my most rewarding experiences and memories of gaming have been through, like, getting to have an interesting idea dangled in front of me as part of a game, right? Because, like, the first time I played a Civilization game, yeah, I definitely will Google automated message. It's actually just on the odd chance something's happened. Apparently it's supposed to be something that's published on the play date, and then there'll be like a proper published version of it. But I know, like, the last time I talked with a guy, he's under a lot of stress, and I have a feeling it's specifically related to the fact that probably the publishing process is not going very well. It's like a first issue of this thing that he's been putting together, and I have a feeling there's probably a lot of people asking him, like, what's going on with it, because, like, there's an amount to be paid for the articles and stuff, and, like, I'm not relying on that money, anytime. For the most part, when I publish something, it's on my own blog for my own interest. So I've held off following up on that, because if I can not be a source of stress for him, I'll feel a little bit better about that. But I'm not going to lie, like, I would like to see that thing published, right? But anyways, I played it, like, way too early to be playing Civilization, right? Like, when you say, it's probably not the first video game I played, but, like, it's really, really early in terms of my gaming. I clearly had no idea what I was doing with it, but, like, Civ has a really, really easy difficulty setting, and pyramids are going to be interesting at any age, right? Arguably more, like, what are you interested in when you're, like, a young boy, right? Dinosaurs and pyramids and spaceships, like, and except for the dinosaur. Actually, Sid Meier tried to do a dinosaur game, and it never really came together. Another book recommendation, by the way. Sid Meier's memoir is wonderful. Both if you're interested in developing games, which I don't fall in that category, but as somebody who's interested in people who develop games, wonderful book for that. The only thing is, I would have loved to have learned a little bit more about the departures from Firaxis that led to Soren Johnson sort of taking on a bigger role, because, like, obviously Brian Reynolds was responsible for some very popular titles at Microprose and Firaxis, and I get the impression it wasn't entirely amicable, which is why I don't think anybody really talks about that time. But it's a shame, right? Because, like, Sid Meier and Brian Reynolds are not going to be around forever. I hope they are, but, like, clearly we don't want a history that's just all the good bits, especially when you have very talented people potentially leaving under bad circumstances. It's good to understand where these things fell apart, hopefully, so that people who follow in those footsteps, we could definitely deal with more Firaxises in the world. Or is it Firaxes? I guess it's Fire Axis, so I guess it would be Firaxes. Clearly people wanting to follow in those footsteps, it would be better if we can learn from the mistakes from, the people who came before us. But I completely understand, right, if it's personal stuff. And both of them are still active in the games industry. So I can see why probably people would want to, keep that aside. But anyways, Sid Meier's memoir, like, the only thing I wish I knew a little bit more was about the departures at Firaxis. But definitely a book I can recommend. But where I was going with this, though, right, is that with like, so even though I was largely just pushing around like the units and building things that were interesting, Civilization was still something that was enough to give me a little bit of a window to a very large and interesting world that I would follow up on, later on. And again, largely the thing that inspired me to ultimately go to university, albeit a few years later than what I probably should have. And the thing is that even though Cyberpunk is a game, I mean, arguably in some cases is kind of an immature game. I'm that opening mission where, the woman's breast is like filling up a quarter of the screen for a majority of the time. And it kind of clashes with the more pornographic advertising, which is trying to make a point, but the game is sometimes falling into that trap of, titillation to get attention. And I still find that a bit of a weird clash, although I'm also probably just a big old Puritan. But the thing is that even though this is a game that you would kind of associate with, a very bro-y kind of game. I mean, and again, that's unfair to Cyberpunk, because clearly there are interesting stories being told here, and there's some serious talent behind it, and there is stuff to chew on if you want. But the point that I kind of want to make here is that the type of person who's going to pick up Cyberpunk 2077 may just be getting it because it's got Keanu Reeves in it and it looks like it's a good, action time, and that may be enough. And yet I can just as easily see, that being a gateway for me to pick up on some of the themes that are underlying the Cyberpunk genre, and again, it being a totally different winding path that ultimately leads me to an Edwards Deming, or something along those lines. Do I think that's the reason why people should play Cyberpunk 2077? No, you should play it because it's a ripping good yarn, and we could deal with more fun in the world than less. But the fact that there's the potential for something more there is what makes this, well, one, worth playing. But number two, one of the reasons why I like playing stuff like this, because it's a chance for me to talk about some of the ideas behind it in a way that, I don't know, I find worthwhile. Now, I swear to God I will get to the end of this mission if it kills me. Thievery. Retrieve the data from the broken training bot. Warblick Hazardous Waste Facility, Anderson Street. There's this kid, folks call him Joe. Red Joe. Now this Joe kid has talent, knows his hooks and jabs. I swear he could knock a horse's teeth out. Point is, the kid's got what it takes to go pro. Problem is, coaches aren't easy to come by in the Badlands. But lo and behold, word is a next-gen sparring bot's landed in the scrapyard there. Still in working order. That's city folk for you. Second a piece of tech glitches, it gets tossed out in the trash, soft included. Anyway, back to the bot. Find it and download its software before they recycle it into metal straws or whatever it is that NC people like. P.S. Oh, and one more thing. The guy that runs a landfill, watch out for him. Real piece of work. So I'm wondering if it's a meeting with a land... Okay. They're not shooting me yet.
Shit weather, eh?
Who is Lizzie Wizzy pretending to be? We are who we pretend to be. I've pretended to be everything. That's why I found the truth. Lizzie Wizzy is an artist par excellence. Her work includes award-winning albums and concert tours, film appearances, as well as, for lack of a better term, conceptual performance art. Her latest artistic obsession features the medium of brain dance. In recent interviews, Lizzie has mused about the boundary between our documentation of reality versus our active shaping of it. Could that mean Lizzie Wizzy plans to scroll her own BD? We can only dream. The chance to live just one day in her chrome skin. Fans would go wild. Yeah, I mean, they're not that special. my dad used to keep asking like stuff that I worked on, and I kept telling him like, Dad, I don't make movies, I make money. So I was based in Vancouver, which, you know, Hollywood North. A lot of production would kind of come up to Canada, but in the end, I'm on a crew, right? So the role that I was in the camera department, which is, it is kind of very Top Gun, right? Like, it's a very arrogant department, and like they, you know, you're expected to like do your job well. Nobody waits for camera and stuff like that. It's cool. Like, it's absolutely suited to my temperament and my, you know, my interests. But, and for like the kind of starting job with that is the, I'm sure you've all like seen in movies about, you know, movies about making movies. And if you haven't seen movies about making movies, The Player, directed by Robert Altman, Barton Fink by the Coen brothers. If you like old movies, The Bad and the Beautiful is probably my favorite movie about making movies. So those three. And I feel like there's a fourth. Oh, Sunset Boulevard, which I would make an argument is actually an underappreciated example of cosmic horror. The problem is that I don't think people think about fame and the kind of crawling madness coming from that as being comparable to Cthulhu, but I still think it's a horror of realization, and I definitely feel like you can make a case that Sunset Boulevard is actually a... I love the fact that there is somebody else in this chat who has seen The Bad and the Beautiful. Oh god, that ending, like that final shot. I don't want to say what it is because I think it's an ending worth preserving for people. But like that final shot of what all the people do in that final phone call is like, oh god, that is like the perfect ending for that story. But yeah, anyway, so like most people are familiar with the like, scene one apple, take one, clap. I actually think, hang on, I might still have a slate. Let me see if I can find that in my my kit. All right, this is my backup slate, but scene 22 apple, take two. So that's where you start in the film industry, clapper loader. I have loaded a film mag. I was more specialized for digital stuff, but yeah, I mean, we used to race each other actually in the dark room to see who could load a mag faster. But yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting. Like, the thing is that it taught me I can love movies but not have to make them. Because the thing about it is that it's very physical work. I'm actually quite skinny. So to a certain extent, some of it was basically like being a mover. No, IMAX definitely became a lot more popular after I had left the film industry. But they are huge. I've both seen IMAX projectors and cameras, and they're massive. I'm sure things have changed a bit, but like they're a big deal. But obviously, you know, it is a way that like photochemical techniques are being preserved. So insofar as you care about that stuff, like, to be honest with you, I'm not as invested in the film versus digital thing. I got this a lot when I was doing photography. I finally have a digital camera now that's like not attached to a camera phone. Although camera phones are amazing. Like, I've got an iPhone here. The low light performance in this thing is unbelievable. But I used a film camera because I had a light meter and I knew how to like handle it. I do black and white, so it's kind of fun to develop your own film anyway. But the biggest thing for me is that I could like go to camera stores and find secondhand film stuff for like a song, like a 50 millimeter lens with a f-stop of 1, or like an aperture of like 1.4. Is it f-stop? I think it's t-stops if it's a film lens, because that's true stop. F-stop is the how wide it is, but not necessarily how much light is going through. But anyways, f or t 1.4. It's like that'll cost you a couple $100, at least for the Canon one. I think there's now like a 1.2 which runs a couple $1,000. But anyways, like basically the glass is more or less the same. The difference is that there wasn't an autofocus for it. You know, I think I got that thing for like $50 in a used camera store, because nobody wanted any of the analog stuff. Everybody was working digital. So for me, you know, I'm cheap, so I would, you know, go in. I actually got a medium format camera for like $75. So again, that's a little bit like shooting IMAX, where you just have a much larger image. But what I would usually do is I just had a scanner. I'd scan the stuff, and if I wanted to touch them up in a editing program, I didn't always do that, but like if I wanted to touch them up, I didn't have. I did develop the film, but I didn't have the kind of the tools or the space to make a proper print. So I would do a digital print, and I would do that through scanning. And if we've got a digital image, why not make modifications with it, right? So it was kind of funny, right? Like people would see me with my analog camera, an old Canon AE1, which I sort of inherited from my mom. I think she did like a world tour, and that was kind of the model to buy, like a really popular consumer model. And you know, I knew how to use it. I could save a lot of money in terms of getting the stuff that mattered. Like obviously the glass for the camera is what really matters in terms of the quality of the images that you'll take. And I tend to like shoot handheld, and I tend to do things that are not always in the best light. So being able to have a nice wide aperture is very helpful in that case. So, you know, it wasn't an effort to try and make some kind of a statement on the superiority of film. In fact, most people wound up very disappointed when they found out that I was, you know, touching up the images digitally afterwards. But, you know, I would think the ideal is to create something beautiful, you know, rather than to try and make some sort of a statement in terms of process. I mean, sometimes process can lead to certain ideas. It's nice to have to think a little bit about your shot, because you know you're not going to be able to look at the digital representation immediately after taking it. But I think some of the best stuff I've ever shot has actually come from that camera, probably just because I shot most of my stuff through that camera, not because of any inherent benefit from it. But yeah, I mean, in the end, like IMAX is a really impressive and Canadian technology, and it's actually really cool that it's done something that has allowed sort of spectacle to stay in the theater. Like obviously Christopher Nolan's really pushing it as a tech. You know, hopefully other people embrace it as well. But regrettably, the only experience I've had with IMAX is watching it, and usually actually watching it more through documentaries than films.
Wow, what a beautiful dump you've got here.
Fuck you.
That is the appropriate response.
I'm looking for a training bot. I heard it might have passed through your hands.
Training bot, you say? Let me see. Perhaps you want Dalbot. Slightly worn and torn, missing legs, but...
Tempting, but no, thanks.
Suit yourself. Training bot. Yes, I have one, but only for sale, and it won't be cheap.
Okay, I'm not cool enough to do this on my own. Am I willing to That's almost going to take all my attribute. Let's just try and steal it.
I'm waiting.
As much as I'd like to threaten this guy, I'm assuming this fellow is not here. Is here for more than show. But yeah, like I definitely don't want to come out strong against film or something like that. Like it's like clearly like the professional filmmakers that are making decisions along those lines do not need to take any lessons from me on what makes sense or what's right or not. I did get that feeling from I did get the feeling from the photographers that I talked to. Like there was, I don't know, it's a little bit like arguing, you know, Canon or versus Nikon or Sony or Panasonic isn't quite the same sort of presence in digital stills, but and you know, like sometimes the stuff is kind of fun as part of the hobby, right? Like it's just, but there is some benefit in recognizing like what part is the work and what part is just sort of, you know, running around and playing around with some of the philosophy. Like I think Tom Sargent, an economist, kind of talks about this regarding sort of the philosophy / economic history part of economics, and like I think he puts it so much better and definitely more concisely, but you know, definitely in sort of the spirit of like it's a good thing to do, but like in limited doses. Like you don't want to make that like the main obsession. I think we'll come back to this after I. Oop. Because it kind of stops you from focusing on like the main task, which is to learn something about the world, right? Like I kind of feel like some of the theory or some of the maybe some more of the normative claims that people make, they're good. They're particularly good for sort of telling you the things to look for or to be interested in, or you know, basically like idea generation. But it's the analogy I would draw would be like it's fighting about the best programming language or the best console. You know, if your point is to enjoy video games, yelling at someone who has a PlayStation when you really like an Xbox or vice versa is kind of orthogonal to enjoying a game, right? So it's not to say that that's not part of the hobby, right? You know, obviously my tastes are vastly superior to those monsters over there. And it's a wonderful way to build an audience on a social media platform or on a broadcasting platform like Twitch. But it is a different activity from enjoying games. Oh, crap. I don't think I can get an E9 out of this, so let's cut our losses. This is what I get for talking during oh god, I've really screwed this up. But yeah, anyways, right, like if that becomes your main focus, then like, I don't know, maybe sign up for a debate club or Toastmasters or something. But yeah, so like it's the like people who, or there's another version of this because like obviously the ability to produce video games, the cost for that has gone down so much. So it's also like arguing about what the best. This has got to be it. Hey. It's like arguing what the best engine is. I remember on Steam there was a... Oh, we already took it. there was an article, or not art, there was like a comment on Assassin's Creed Unity, and it's like, this was like the bad Assassin's Creed. Was this made in Unity? I hear that Unity's the bad game engine. And it's like, come on, like Hollow Knight's made in Unity, and Phantom Brigade's made in Unity, and Kerbal Space Program, and the Endless series, like Endless Legend, Endless Space. Not Observer, but the game before it, Layers of Fear, right? Like, there's plenty of really good games made in Unity, and there's plenty of not very impressive games made in Unreal. And there's a hell of a lot of games that I've played, and I couldn't tell you what engine they used. But I'm pretty sure the people who are like going onto r/game dev, yelling at each other about what the best game engine is, I'm gonna guess that those are probably the people not making games. So yeah, it's, you know, it's fun. Like, everybody, I get where the fun is in terms of sort of having your team and cheering for your team, and there's always a little value in doing that, I think. But I do tend to notice for creative, like, the fact of the matter is creative stuff is hard to do, right? It took me a long time to be able to say to myself, you know, you're spending this much time on streaming stuff. You clearly have demonstrated that you're able to do sort of 3 streams a week, 3 hours, even when you're not feeling up to it. And yet you say you like writing so much, and I do. Like, writing is the thing I'm never going to be bothered by if, you know, another human being doesn't read what I have to write. But I had to be honest with myself and reflect on the fact that I hadn't done it for a few days. I'm like, do you really need me to tell, like, are you serious about this writing thing if you're not actually doing it every day? So it was June of last year that I sort of said, is like, it does not matter what I'm keeping. I actually have an Excel spreadsheet of how many words I write and how much time I spent. So I have like a words per minute. I've plotted it out. It follows a good Poisson distribution for the stats nerds in chat. Yeah, like, but it's easy to understand why, right? There's so many distractions. There's so many things that are not doing the creative work. That's so much easier to do. Creation is difficult. And being able to focus on all of these, you know, other things, you know, what's the best camera? Should I use Scrivener or Emacs or Word or Google Docs? You know, it's really easy to see why people fall into that trap. You know, or should I use film or digital? What's gonna give me the best photos? And, like, you know, there's the old saying, right? The best camera is the one that you have in your hand. So, so it's why, like I said, you know. You don't want, you don't need to be a monk, and you don't need to be a Vulcan. You can get your blood. Sometimes getting your blood up is about something is fun, right? You know, you're passionate about it, but it should never become a substitute for the thing that that you want to do, because it's hard enough on its own to do good work. Like, not even do good work, to do any work. That it's good to avoid the distractions. Waste collection. Hello, we have another shipment of reagents ready for disposal. 4 cisterns, 10,000 gallons each. Category Nush S09, human health hazard. I trust we'll handle the matter like before. Promotional deal? Just make sure all the paperwork is where it should be in the event of an inspection. We appreciate your flexibility concerning regulatory red tape. Best, Michaela Ledoux, Regional Manager, Petrochem. Okay, we've read these. Let's excuse me. Grab some more goodies. I've got 2 3-7As, so 7A, E9, 7A would be best. Yep. Now, I've been rambling on about my opinions of just about everything in the world, but I know a few of you who are regulars are creative types. but particularly among the new people. But of course, that's open for anyone. What do you do to express yourself? Do you write clever Twitch messages? Do you design worlds for role-playing? Do you draw? Drawing is the one thing that I really wish I was better at. Photography, make short films, Blender animations, traditional animation. I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I figure I should at least give people a chance to get a word in edgewise. I wonder if I can sneak... Okay, I'm gonna get caught if they do that. World building, DM for a small group. What system do you use, Dendrian? Because I was actually just talking about how I picked up Traveler and a couple of source books. But unfortunately, tabletop is discrimination against the lonely for me, so I like source books because I think they're really good at getting the imagination going, but I have not been able to partake. So I could try the 1C55-7A. I didn't think this through. So if I had, I would have also been able to get the 55, but currently just working on 3.5 D&D campaign, but you have some more books ready to be read through. Cool. Index Gnome, 3D modeling and game design for you. I keep forgetting the game design side of the equation, Index Gnome. Actually, I think that's the first time I've heard of 3D modeling for you. But welcome, by the way. The thing that bugs me the most about the game idea thing is that I realize game ideas are useless. Like, it's game implementations that we play. But when I tell people a couple of my game ideas, I keep hearing, and like, again, they're developers themselves, right? So I usually wind up hearing, like, oh, that's so good, you should make that. And I'm like, I know. I'm like, with what time? So... and that's honestly, so everybody's got their own system, right? But for me, that is like the kiss of death because I've gotten the reward for the idea, right? The implementation is never going to be as good as the idea, but I've already got the good thing. I've got the warm fuzzies from someone I respect, you know, telling me that I had a good idea. So that makes me even less likely to realize the idea as a result. So I really should stop telling people ideas until I'm actually ready to show them. But it's hard because I like having ideas.
Beautiful, V. Red Joe's training starts tomorrow. Then it won't be long until you hear his name again. He has potential, that boy. Nice work. Until next time.
All right. Thank you all for being very patient with me, and especially those of you who stuck around with Dendrian's broadcast, or raid, rather. And I need to be careful how I say this, because I want to say that, like, normally when there's a raid going on, you sign up for one experience, and then, you know, you potentially wind up with another one. And I don't want to say Dendrian doesn't cover similar ground, because obviously they're a very thoughtful streamer. but they are a better streamer. So I very much appreciate you all slumming it on my side of the internet. But I had a late start tonight, and it is, what time is it? Yeah, it's 2 in the morning, and I still have some stuff that I need to get through. You only make and design for yourself. Only a handful of people have ever played any of them. Well, the good news here is, Index Gnome, the one game that I have a designer credit on has also only... I have the itch stats on it, so it also only has a handful of people that's ever played it, but it is something that's available for everyone to play, so you're in a better position than I am. But yes, I need to wrap it up for tonight, and I appreciate all of you hanging out with me. There are a couple of options that I have here. Obviously, because it's very late, I don't have the normal people who I host. So I will. I'm going to host Will Shand. No problem. Thank you very much for the host. Actually, I should say, for those of you who are maybe interested in coming back, Monday, I normally actually been doing Terra Invicta, but I really liked Against the Storm, and if I've been playing Cyberpunk on Fridays, maybe I'll change it up with Against the Storm for some Mondays. But Hooded Horse has been very good to me in terms of keeping me in their games to stream. I really appreciate that. That's why they kind of get a dedicated day. So it'll be either that or Terra Invicta sort of for the foreseeable future. Wednesday, Brace Yourself Games, a very similar role. In fact, they gave me both Industries of Titan and Phantom Brigade around the time I had kind of the dissolution of a very good relationship with a kind of a long-standing partner. So they're another developer who I like to sort of pay back that early faith that they gave. So we'll be doing more Phantom Brigade on Wednesday. Friday, I have a feeling until I get out from this mountain of work that I need to do, I'll probably be doing some more Cyberpunk because it does let me, just riff off of some ideas and play around. But if any of that sounds interesting for you, I try to start around 7 o'clock Eastern Time. It's about an hour-long window that I give to myself. But if any of that sounds interesting to you, you've all been lovely to broadcast for, and I look forward to doing that again. I will draw your attention to Revived Snow, who is listed as a Canadian streamer. They are currently playing Atomic Heart. I actually found them through playing Phantom Brigade. What I found was interesting is that they are a broadcaster who is using text-to-speech. So this is a VTuber that showcases games with goals to be a top text-to-speech mute streamer. And enjoys interacting via chat in English and Korean without the use of a live voice. So I actually think that's kind of a neat approach. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that broadcaster if you're looking for something new. But there is somebody who I knew from Vancouver when I lived there, Will Shand, and he has a fun little broadcast which does usually he'll do sort of small horror games, either the sort of thing that you'd find off of itch.io or sort of at the bottom of the pile on Steam. But I don't know, he's got an interesting style. He does some fun stuff with some hand-drawn animations, and he's somebody, I think he's been doing this since the Justin TV days and that, but he's definitely somebody who I enjoy hanging out with. I've had the pleasure of meeting him in person, and I usually feel is a safe, kind of a safe pair of hands to leave you all in. So again, thank you everybody for hanging out. Thank you for prompting some really interesting discussions. I do appreciate it when people hang out and I get a chance to share some of the things that I'm interested in. And I hope that Mr. Shand can keep you to the end of the night. Till next time.